My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there. My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GBNews.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Tonight, we're live with Vince Cable, the former business secretary in the coalition government, the man who predicted the credit crunch. We'll get his verdict on the budget. Plus, in the clash, should we scrap foreign aid? And my superstar panel. Wait till you hear these names. Dominique Samuels, boom. Andrew Doyle, boom. Rebecca Reed, double boom. First, the news headlines with Polly. You're watching Tonight Live. It's Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton. We've got a really, really busy show. 3 hours with my panel reacting to the big stories of the day. Very excited about our big question guest. And you know, it is Vince Cable, one of the most experienced politicians of his generation. He predicted the credit crunch. So he's looked at the books. And what does he think about Rishi Sunak's budget? In the clash, should we scrap foreign aid? A big debate about that. We know from the Chancellor's budget statement that the full amount of the foreign aid budget, 0.7% of GDP, will be restored in the years to come. But should we think again about whether we actually should have it at all? I'll hear from all sides on that. So a big 3 hours to come, but first, this. People will need to eat less meat and change their flying habits in order to tackle the climate crisis. This, according to the UK's chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance. Now, do you not think that this man has had enough input into our lives for the last year and a half? He and Sir Chris Whitty, the most terrifying double act since The Craze, have been the authors of lockdown policies which have seen people imprisoned in their homes for months on end, who have presided over a spiralling non-COVID death toll from the untreated other illnesses ignored by the NHS, and, as we discovered yesterday in the budget, have cost the country the best part of £500 billion, all as a result of the damage caused. This was policy. Now, I don't think that Whitty or Vallance are bad people. Far from it. I just think they're wrong. I would argue that these ruinous policies were unsuccessful, given that we don't appear to have arrested the spread of the virus. We have one of the highest death tolls from COVID in the world. So did the measures work? And were they merited? Well, a peer-reviewed study by Professor Simon Wood suggests cases were falling before each of the 3 national lockdowns, and our per capita death rate is far higher than that of many countries that didn't lock down at all, yes, like Sweden. But Whitty, Vallance and others haven't been humbled by the data, a glance at which makes the case for interventions crumble by the day. Cases in Lithuania with vaccine passports and strict mask mandates, for example, are over 1,000 times higher than in restriction-free Sweden, where they have declared the pandemic over. Now, commentators don't like you mentioning Sweden because the truth is inconvenient. Thankfully, there are other examples, Texas and Florida, to name but 2. COVID cases in the Sunshine State of Florida, for example, are now among the lowest in the whole of the United States, and they've been restriction-free for the best part of a year. It was called Neanderthal thinking by President Joe Biden. And yet, there's talk of Plan B, low-level restrictions here this winter. Face masks, social distancing and working from home. Sir Patrick Vallance has said we should be ready to enact Plan B if cases rise. Do these people not do self-reflection? Are they not aware of data? And what about the cost? Whitehall officials have told Number 10 Plan B would bring a bill of 18 billion quid. Money, borrowed billions on your behalf, doesn't seem to matter to these privileged, out-of-touch scientists, who, of course, have a handsome pension and a job for life. Far from being humbled, the likes of Vallance and others have clearly been emboldened by the public spotlight, and he's now wagging his finger about air travel and your hard-earned 2 weeks in Turkey that he'd like to see stuffed. You'd think, wouldn't you, that having been the face of these COVID measures that have had such an impact on the country and our lives, that these civil servants would think twice about continuing to dictate to us about how we live our lives. You'd think they'd give us a break, but they've got a taste for it now, drunk on the power. As we reach, hopefully, the tail end of this pandemic, power must be transferred back to you, the people, and away from these unelected technocrats. We've seen what happens when scientific pen pushers run the country. Eye-watering debt, a wrecked economy, an NHS waiting list of 12 million people, and a spiralling non-COVID death toll. And how is you not having a full English breakfast going to save the planet whilst India, America, China and Brazil continue to consume and pollute with abandon? And I've got profound concerns about Vallance's wording. It was very clever, very casual. Eat a bit less meat, he said. And that sounds reasonable, but we've been here before. 3 weeks to flatten the curve. Remember that? A bit less meat is so-called nudge messaging, right? Nudge messaging in which you're being softened up to get used to an idea which will then become the norm. All of the instruments of control and psychological manipulation that have been deployed during the pandemic and explained brilliantly in Laura Dodsworth's book, A State of Fear, will simply be transferred over to the green agenda. And just wait, because it won't be long before the first government scientist suggests occasional lockdowns to save the planet. 3 weeks to flatten the, North Pole? So having had a taste of this manipulation and control and having seen the consequences of the science, I no longer trust the messaging of these people, and I certainly don't trust their policies. For so many, the science is a 4-letter word. We have apparently been presented with a consensus, about how to tackle COVID, which was anything but. Ask the signatories to the Great Barrington Declaration, who consider lockdowns to be the biggest public health cock-up in history. They didn't follow the science, even though they themselves are some of the greatest scientists on the planet. Professors Jay Bhattacharya, Sunetra Gupta and Martin Kulldorff among them. And many scientists have been too scared to speak out, fearing for their careers. So I'd like an open debate about the science around meat and global warming, for example. One thing is beyond debate, however. We are omnivores. As well as veggies, nuts, and a bit of fruit, we are supposed to eat meat, fish, and dairy, which provide a ready source of protein. This diet, based around animal protein, has got us to where we are today as a species. I doubt we would have reached the summit of the natural kingdom off the back of oat milk, vegetarian sausages, and soya bacon. Grass-fed cows, which is what we have in this country, live on terrain which is uninhabitable for humans. They eat grass, which we can't eat, and they water and nourish the land with their waste product. It's called regenerative farming, and it sounds pretty environmentally friendly to me. It sounds better than the air miles, the packaging, and the million obscure ingredients you get in a vegan alternative. Look, salad and veggies are great, and I've got loads of vegan and vegetarian viewers. Many of them love it. They feel fantastic and well done. But too much of the plant-based diet is processed food hell, which will make us even sicker than we already are today. Which is why this push to go plant-based is a load of bull. And I'm pushing back in anticipation of this assault on our dinner plate. It's coming, folks. You watch and you learn. Any boffin that tries to dictate to us about what we choose to eat will get a pizza my mind. They can burger off. This is GB News. It is Thursday, the 28th of October. You're watching Tonight Live with me, Mark Dolan, in for the boss, Dan Wootton, and a really busy show for you. In the clash, should we scrap foreign aid? We'll hear from both sides on that one. More detail on the sentencing of Daniel Hussein, the evil murderer of two women in Wembley Park last year. We'll speak to our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Is the government redeploying its lockdown tactics to try to push the government's expensive green agenda? That was the topic of my monologue. We'll return to that subject with the host of Reasoned UK, Darren Grimes. He'll be here at 9:45. Top commentator and journalist Emma Webb will look at the cancellation of a slavery abolitionist in The Outsider. That's right, someone who campaigned to end slavery is now apparently problematic. How ironic that this problem should be happening at Imperial College. Find out more after 10. In Uncancelled at 11, we're heading to the United States to speak to a top American political strategist, Errol Moorcock. We're going to talk about Joe Biden's vow to make billionaires cry with new taxes on the super rich. So much for aspiration. Plus, have we reached peak selfie? One woman has caused quite a stir after posing for a sexy selfie in front of her dad's open casket. We'll have all of that, plus more in our media buzz. As always, before the end of the show, we will reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. And our big question tonight at 10 is a humdinger. One of the most experienced politicians in the country. Some love him, some loathe him. I'm personally a fan. Former business secretary at a time of economic crisis for the country in 2010, Vince Cable will be reacting to the Chancellor's budget. He's looked at the books and he's the man who predicted the credit crunch. So what does he think? And now's the time to get in touch. We'll be taking your emails throughout the show. It's my personal email address, mark@gbnews.uk. Come straight to my laptop. Tweet us using the handle @GBNews or Facebook your question by searching for GB News. A big 3 hours to come. Now it's Thursday, which, as you well know, is the new Friday. So grab something chilled from the fridge or fire up the kettle and let's get to work. Brilliant stuff. We've got Jake and Tom steering the ship tonight. The dream team working hard on a brilliant show. A heady mix of entertainment, information and stimulation. So don't go anywhere. And I can't do it without you. So do keep those emails coming in, mark@gbnews.uk. What do you think? Are you comfortable about the idea of eating more of a plant-based diet? Will it save the planet? Is it the right thing to do? I especially want to hear from you if you don't agree. So drop me a line right now. Reacting to the big stories of the day and looking at tomorrow's newspaper front pages is my shining Rolls Royce of a panel tonight. Author and journalist, Rebecca Reed, double boom. Host of Free Speech Nation, a good friend of mine, Andrew Doyle, and political commentator, another old pal, writer, broadcaster, Dominique Samuels. Great to have all three of you with us. Rebecca, can I start with you? Do you think that Sir Patrick Vallance is speaking out of turn, telling us to eat a bit less meat?
First of all, I love the flattery. Please keep it coming. I think we're all enjoying it.
You are now officially double boom.
Well, we do miss Dan, but there's not that much. There's not as much flattery when he's here. So bye, Dan. Yeah. Do I think he's out of place? No. I mean, it doesn't bother me. The average person in the UK eats meat or a meat-derived product 3 times every day, or at least that was. That's
good to hear.
It's quite a lot of meat in one day, and if you look back at how we have eaten over previous centuries, certainly into the sort of 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even. When people were generally better at cooking, it was much more normal. You'd have a roast on a Sunday and then you would use the leftovers from that. So you might make a casserole with the leftovers and then you would make stock. So you would get a lot out of that. And I think that's a really lost skill. I think if we could cook better, we'd be buying less volume of meat and using it more smartly.
I think that's a brilliant shout. And a lot of the meat that we eat comes in the form of a processed product, which is blended with horrible vegetable oils and flour and God knows what else.
Because it's easy to just put it in the oven.
I think that's a really, really fair point. So back to real food. You think that the more real food we eat, even if some of it is meat, will actually be better for the environment?
If you buy less, so I'm a big fan of buying from my local butcher. It's on Essex Road. Love you guys. Doubt you're watching. But I'm a big fan of having a proper local butcher who you go to, where you have a sense of where the meat comes from, and buying it respectfully and treating it respectfully, because it was something that was alive, and it is something. And I somehow feel like just cooking it badly or making huge amounts of it doesn't respect the fact that it was once alive. So buy better.
Rebecca, we don't disagree on too many things, and that's certainly one that we can certainly share a common view. Andrew Doyle, what do you think about this? Do you think that this is a bit of sort of nudge psychology going on, that we're being sort of softened up for a sort of vegan revolution in this country?
I think it might well be an attempt at it, but I don't think that kind of thing would work. I think he's perfectly free to give advice as much as he wants, and people are free to take it or leave it. I think it all comes down to individual choice. If people want to eat meat, that's up to them. If they want to be vegan, that's up to them too. It's not really a big problem. I would echo Rebecca's point. You know, I think if I were giving advice, I'd say we probably do eat too much meat. It's strange, the amount that we eat. You know, most people in most countries can't afford to eat that much meat, so it is a relatively recent development. But it's not up to me, it's up to me what I eat, and it's up to you what you eat, and that's as far as
I think, Andrew, I think we've been omnivores since day one. I think we've been eating meat since the beginning, and that's the point. That's why we have prevailed as a species.
Probably not 3 times a day, probably not.
But you're a vegetarian, aren't you, Andrew?
I'm a vegetarian as well.
So you have made a conscious choice to do the good thing, the right thing, really.
Yeah, I'd say everyone else is evil, yeah.
No, it is the right thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's about
Dominique.
being right or wrong, because there are very specific nutritional benefits that you can get easily from meat. And the reason why, generationally, we have increased our consumption of meat is because a lot of those products are more affordable. So if you're a poor family, having, meat, veg and a carb, it's fairly cheap and fairly easy to do, and that's why so many families rely on it. When my mum didn't have a lot of money, she'd go to Tesco or Asda, for example, and buy a big box of really quite cheap meat. So it is beneficial for people. And I think what a lot of people forget when they propagate this plant-based diet is that a lot of these alternatives are more expensive, so therefore a lot of people simply can't afford them.
Dominique, if you go meat-free, OK, I'm all for having avocados and salad and
I don't like avocados.
But the issue you've got is that a busy plant-based person will wind up purchasing processed products with 1 million ingredients which have got air miles and questionable health benefits.
Yeah, the same point was raised with the popularity of avocado, actually, which you just mentioned, and the environmental issues with that, none of these alternatives are, right or wrong, I don't think. I think it should be a personal choice, but I think it would be naive of me to say that this push towards a plant-based diet, echoed by Valence, I don't think this is really about choice. I think it's about nudging people into leading a specific way of life. That's why so many fast food chains are pushing plant-based. You see it all over our adverts. It is a concerted effort, and I think it's naive to...
And I hear what you're saying,
it.
and Andrew, the issue we've got is I agree with you. It should be a matter of personal choice, and actually you're a great advert for being a vegetarian because you're quite the specimen. So,
I am.
I've had to sort of rethink my views on the plant-based diet.
Yeah.
But the whole point is that for the last year and a half, we've not had the freedom of choice to go out to work, to identify and assess the risk of COVID for ourselves. And my concern is that the strategy towards COVID will be the same towards what's on our plate in time.
I can't see how that could possibly work. I can't see... I mean, when it comes to a pandemic, there is the fear of a virus, and there are good reasons why people would be susceptible to fear-mongering during that kind of time. I don't think a government that says you must eat what we tell you to eat is ever going to have a public that go along with that. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, I think it was kind of twas ever thus type thing, isn't it? Like, they've always used scare tactics. Like, the adverts that tell you not to smoke are scary, and the adverts that tell you not to drink are scary, and we still do those things. Like, it doesn't... I think COVID was a very different thing, because I think it felt like a very immediate fear, whereas drinking is like, it might kill me in 20 years, but it's so nice right now.
I think if you look at it in the context of the climate crisis, it is very, very similar, because with the pandemic and with the climate crisis, there is very similar messaging. And what people are saying is, we have a climate crisis, we need to act now, there's not much time left. You can do this simple thing, and the one thing you can do is eat less meat. And that's why more and more people are going vegan and eating more of a plant-based diet, and it's specifically because of that messaging that is actually rooted in behavioural science.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think.
I think it is a bad thing, because you're convincing people to do something that they wouldn't have otherwise done had they been given the free agency to do it.
But I think they still have the agency, don't they?
Yeah.
They still have the ability to make those decisions for themselves.
But not directly if they're being fed propaganda from every major news network and, they're visually drinking it in from every single advert that they see. I don't necessarily think it's a straightforward, conscious decision.
I think if that were true, then nobody would smoke, nobody would drink alcohol, nobody would speed. It clearly doesn't work that solidly, because we all still do things we know we shouldn't do.
But it's drastically increased. The number of people that smoke has really decreased.
I don't know. I have faith in humanity. I have faith in our agency and our ability to make our own decisions and to not be susceptible to propaganda. But I think, I think the government's...
You've obviously forgotten the last year and a half, then.
Well, no, I think...
Where have you been, Andrew?
There was some sense in that. It did help a bit.
I think people have made a choice that you perhaps don't agree with. I don't think that means they've been brainwashed.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's not... OK, but I'm just saying it's not me saying that they're just brainwashed. I'm saying that you have to admit that behavioural science, as a fact, is deliberately designed to influence the way people behave, and that's the same with nudge theory. It's not just saying they're brainwashed.
That's the intention. I completely agree, but I just don't think it works.
I credit people with a bit more stubbornness than that, I think. I'm far too badly behaved to do what I'm
I hear
told.
what you're saying, Rebecca. I thought we had it until March 2020. But there you go, look...
But lots of us wanted to stay at home. The first lockdown was lovely.
Because they spent
it wasn't
propaganda.
I didn't have to be convinced to not see people and stay at home drinking. It was fantastic.
Because they funded
adverts
to tell people that they were more at risk than they were.
I didn't love not going...
Some people love the lockdown and they want it to carry on forever. Well, look, a brilliant panel. I know you'll agree, and you'll be hearing from them throughout the show. So excited to hear their views about the day's big stories, including, have we reached peak selfie with a woman doing a rather sexy, sultry selfie in front of her father's coffin? You couldn't make it up. Also coming up, a really dreadful story. A teenager who murdered two sisters after believing he had made a chilling pact with a demon has been jailed. GB News' brilliant Home Affairs and Security editor Mark White will be with me to discuss that. But next up, in the clash, should we scrap foreign aid? We'll discuss that in 2.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
You're watching Tonight Live. It's Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton for the next couple of weeks. And lots of emails coming in, mark@gbnews.uk. Thank you so much for your emails so far. This is from Nicola. Hi, Mark. I am a vegetarian, but I refuse to eat the plant-based stuff that is now overtaking our supermarkets. It tastes awful. I don't want to eat pretend meat. It's expensive and it's way too processed. I prefer to eat naturally. I have no issue with people eating meat. But I do have an issue with the way we treat animals that are grown for meat. Maybe eating wild, free-range animals, as our ancestors did, would help the planet. Regards, Nicola. Nicola, what a brilliant email, and I think you're dead right. It's time now for the clash. Was Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, right to promise to restore our foreign aid budget from 0.5 to 0.7% of GDP? With me to discuss this is an old friend of mine, former Brexit Party MEP, Rupert Lowe. Hello, Rupert. And Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Hi, Professor Jeffrey Sachs from the Centre for Sustainable Development at Columbia University. Professor Sachs, let's kick off with your good self. Do you think that following the biggest recession in 300 years, Britain can really afford to give money to other countries?
To afford to give a small fraction of 1% of GDP more? Yeah, I think it can.
When the country is running a budget deficit, which you know as well as I do, Professor Sachs, means that more money is going out than is coming in. So technically, this uptick in a contribution to other countries will be borrowed money. We're effectively borrowing money to give to other countries.
Well, if you want to borrow the money, fine. If you want to raise the taxes a little bit on some wealthy people, fine. But can Britain afford a small fraction of 1% of income when it has all sorts of self-interest and responsibility to do so? Of course, the answer is yes.
Do you regret the fact that the percentage out of GDP dropped for the next few years to 0.5%?
Yeah, I think it's a shame because Britain and the U.S. and other countries created a lot of damage in the rest of the world, in climate and in other areas, and we should face some human decency and actually do something about
Professor Sachs,
we should also, excuse me, we should also take care of ourselves by helping to ensure that people are vaccinated against COVID, because that's also a good thing.
Well,
so
Professor Sachs,
it seems to me that...
I completely agree with you. I think we should be sharing our doses with countries around the world so that the most vulnerable can be protected. I completely agree with you. But are you suggesting that foreign aid is about reparations, about our guilt from the past? And you mentioned the fact that we've created global warming. What about China?
Well, I think all countries that have historical emissions have responsibility, of course.
And what about the financial case for this rise from 0.5 to 0.7? Which public services do you think we should cut investment into as a result of paying that money? Who should get less money? Schools, hospitals, the police?
Well, I'm going to leave that to your chancellor, and maybe it should be higher revenues that should do this. Maybe it should be less military outlays. There are lots of choices in society.
Well, Professor Sachs, we have the highest. Professor Sachs, we have the highest tax burden.
A tiny fraction of when we're talking about a tiny fraction of 1% of GDP, so that people can stay alive in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and we don't have new variants coming to sweep over the UK, and when there are basic responsibilities, it actually happens that there are responsibilities to help other countries. You're going to be hosting COP26 next week. And one of the promises of the rich countries to the poor countries for the last dozen years was that there would be financing for climate. Okay, do you want to bollocks up your summit next week? You go right ahead, but I think it would be a mistake.
Professor Sachs, I do enjoy your colourful language, but you've suggested that we could raise taxes. We currently have the highest tax burden since the 1950s. And then you've also suggested that perhaps, we could think of other measures such as having less defence spending. So either we have more taxes, which will cripple the economy and create more poverty and division within this country, or we reduce defence and make the country less safe. Not a very attractive choice.
Well, it's been a long time that in Britain, thinking about the poor has just been seen as some terrible burden. So don't do it. And all the chancellor is saying is what most people believe, which is that it is a right and responsible and decent thing to do. This is less than 1% of income to actually address things like pandemics abroad or the climate disaster abroad. So I don't really see your point, frankly, to say in all of the things that the UK could do, it can't find 0.2 of 1% of GDP to think about the rest of the world more, that in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a climate emergency. If that's the way you feel about it, I think it's a lack of imagination, actually.
OK, well, look, Professor Sachs, hold that thought. I'll come back to you. Rupert Lowe, you're a former politician and also a former very successful entrepreneur. Do these figures add up to you, the idea that it's effectively cost neutral to share our national income with other countries?
Well, my view is very different to Jeffrey's. We live in a country which for some time has been running a budget deficit, a trade deficit, a balance of payments deficit. We've now got accrued debt of something over 100% of our GDP. So, we are not in good financial shape, and we've seen a huge decline, really, in investment in our economy. We're relying more and more on Asia for the imports of our finished goods. We aren't, in my view, fostering new businesses at the rate we should be. And, I go back to the example of Victorian Britain, where we had surpluses everywhere and we had an extremely successful economy. And we were then in a very good position to discuss whether or not foreign aid is a good idea. Foreign aid in itself is not a bad idea. Do I think that Rishi Sunak, I think this is Boris's budget, not Rishi's. And I think the last few comments which he made at the end of his speech, where he talked about the individual and things that the Tories should be talking about. I think that was the true Rishi Sunak. So I think that he's been strong-armed into this budget. I profoundly disagree with what they've done. With regard to foreign aid, do I think it's a good thing to return it over time to 0.7% of GDP? No, I don't. I mean, they cut it to 0.5% for very good reason. My issue with aid, and look, it's a bit like domestic aid. I was chairman of the Prince's Trust in the Southeast for probably 5 or 6 years. And we raised a lot of money. And I think that's a great charity because what it does is it promotes the individual to help themselves. And I think, a lot of Jeffrey's programs, I've had a quick look at some of the stuff. Again, it's top-down central planning. It's nobody's auditing how this foreign aid is being spent. Nobody's auditing whether or not it's actually delivering a better way of life or indeed improving the standard of living for people in largely Africa. So, a lot of these agencies and these, charities audit their own work, which is not a good idea. You need an independent audit to make sure that the money is being well spent. And you know what, Mark? Quite a lot of foreign aid, the trillions that have gone in foreign aid, end up in some despot or dictator's Swiss bank account because it's not well dispersed. So I like, Paul Kagame in Rwanda. He thinks foreign aid is a cancer. He says it removes the incentives for the domestic people to actually get off their backsides and do their own work and build their own economy. And yes, they've still got a long way to go, but they've come from a very low base. The standard of living in Rwanda has improved. Public services work. And coming back to Britain, I feel very strongly we've now got a situation where we rely on something called quantitative easing, which is a brand new creation, which has gradually happened since 2010. And that is basically what I define as getting high on your own supply. So, last year, we spent roughly 400 billion deficit. Most of that was created by the Bank of England from thin air. And what that's doing is it's undermining the savings of all of the domestic people in the UK. We currently have people dying in hospitals of cancer because the NHS has become a COVID-only service. We've got inflation going up, largely as a result of these green initiatives, which are driving up the price of gas. It's gone up over 400% over the last 12 months. And you are going to see extreme poverty in the UK. So I am of the view we should be spending money, developing our economy, making it more robust, creating employment. And when we've got our own ship in order, then we can look at maybe delivering more foreign aid. But right now, we're not in a position to do it.
Gentlemen, the clock is against us. Just a few seconds. I'd love to have more, Professor Sachs, but a few seconds, if you will, because we need to get to a breaking story. Your final thoughts on this?
Well, good luck with Brexit. It sounds like your economy's in a huge mess. I'm sorry for it.
Well, look, Professor Sachs, thank you so much for joining us, Director at the Centre for Sustainable Development at Columbia University. And former Brexit Party MEP Rupert Lowe. I beg to differ with the Professor about global Britain. We are trade deals a go-go, but that is a conversation for another day. Thanks to both of the gentlemen involved. What do you think? I'll get to your emails shortly. mark@gbnews.uk. Now, Adelaide United footballer Josh Cavallo came out as gay yesterday and became the only current male professional footballer in the world to have done so. His club described Josh as remarkable and brave, and the world of football was unanimous in their support for him. It's hoped this will be a milestone moment in men's football. I'm delighted to say that Josh is with me now. Hi, Josh.
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really well. I've just got one word for you. Congratulations.
Thank you, mate. It's been very overwhelming the last 24 hours, and I couldn't be happier that I can finally be my true self and stop hiding away from the world.
It's the most wonderful news. Being gay is who you are. It's not a lifestyle choice.
Yes, definitely. It's something that I've grown up with and I've struggled with. And in the game of football, I never saw it growing up. And it was something that I want to show to the world and show to the younger generation and to whoever's watching this or whoever saw my video and is in a similar shoes or finds themselves in a similar situation, that it is okay. And you can be gay and play football, and you cannot fit in and still be okay. So it's the message that I wanted to get around the world and show that people don't need to live like this anymore.
I think it's a big moment. Elton John came out as gay in 1976, Josh, at a time when being gay raised eyebrows. He was told not to do it, and he set an important trend. Do you think that other footballers will be more confident about coming out following your brave decision?
Yeah, look, I think that's exactly what I want to get across. I want to show that it's okay, you know, in the normal world, being gay isn't, people don't look twice. So why is it being looked twice in football? It's just a message I want to get across to the world, and hopefully in a couple of years' time or in the near future, you know, this is normalised and it's not such a big deal.
Yeah. Have you played your first game in front of a crowd since your statement?
No, I had a day off yesterday. I'm going back to training today, and we have a game on the weekend, which is exciting. And I'm looking forward to putting the boots back on even today, just to see what it's like with all the weight off my shoulders.
I'm sure you'll get plenty of support at the weekend. What position do you play, Josh?
I'm a left back.
Oh, that's fantastic. And how are you performing in the league? Where are you in the league at the moment?
So we're in pre-season at the moment. We just came out of a season, and we finished 5th. We had a very good season last year, and our team was upgraded over the break, so I can't wait to get started.
Oh, I'm sure you're going to be top of the table by Christmas, Josh. Here's hoping. Briefly, obviously you hesitated to come out, understandably so. What were you more worried about? The atmosphere and reaction from the locker room, from your colleagues, or from the crowd?
I think it's more from my colleagues, and, you know, my teammates for me are my brothers, and I care what they think. You know, I don't want them to feel uncomfortable, and it's something that I've lived for a long time now, and it started to take over my life and my happiness. So there's times where I was on the field and I was thinking about in the change rooms afterwards, what am I going to say to the boys? What stories am I going to make up? And it wasn't a life I wanted to live, and it was a huge distraction for football for me. So it's something that I've always dealt with when I've been trying to make football at the elite level. But I think it's important now that I go to training and I take in and absorb everything, and it's going to take a little bit for me to get used to, because I'm so used to putting up this armour of me not being my true self.
And why does football have this problem? Is it because it's a very stereotypically macho sport? Not that gay men can't be macho, of course.
Yeah, look, it's hard to tell. It could be for multiple factors. It could be because it's a masculine sport. It could be because it's never been seen before in the sport. And look, we're in 2021 here, and I definitely think times are changing and the world is more diverse. And look, I've read nothing but support. You know, Zlatan Ibrahimovic reached out, John Terry reached out to me, Hector Bellerin, and clubs like Manchester United and Barcelona, Juventus, and Liverpool, and showing their support to me. So I think that's great for the world to see that, you know, straight people such as Piqué from Barcelona and Griezmann, someone that's won a World Cup, is reaching out saying, Josh, it's okay, we're really proud of you. So I hope to send the trend, and I hope in a few years' time it's not such a big deal.
Finally, Josh, when are you coming to the Premier League?
I'm waiting on my call for that one, but I think it's going to be soon.
Listen, Tottenham could do with a strong defender.
Well, we'll get onto it.
Brilliant stuff. It's been a privilege to speak to you, and big congratulations. I wish you every happiness in your personal life and every success in your football career.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant stuff. There you go, Josh Cavallo. What a remarkable guy, an impressive young man, I think you'll agree. And a good news story on a Thursday. It's just what we need, isn't it? We love a bit of good news on GB News. It's not all doom and gloom here, is it? Can't wait to get to your emails. That's always lots of fun as well. Love your reaction to that American professor saying that Brexit's been a disaster. I had to chuckle inwardly at that one. We'll react to that shortly, but we're also going to cover some other big stories of the day. Don't go anywhere. I'll see you in 2. My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation.
This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
On the government's green agenda, Corinne has emailed from Manchester, beautiful part of the country. Hi, Corinne, and a lovely name as well, sounds Irish. Hi, Mark, Dominique is exactly right in the establishment trying to coerce the public in regards to plant meat. And there you go, not happy about that one. Surely it's all about personal choice. Now, a man who murdered two sisters in a random attack has been jailed for life. Danielle Hussein will serve a minimum of 35 years. This is the moment that police armed with a taser stun gun moved in on the 19-year-old who just weeks earlier killed sisters Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman after making a satanic blood pact. The sisters had been with a group of friends on the 5th of June last year celebrating Biba's birthday. As the friends drifted off home, Biba and Nicole stayed on in the Friant Country Park, dancing late into the night, until coming face to face with their killer, who stabbed them dozens of times. Their bodies were discovered almost 2 days later by Nicole's boyfriend, as family and friends launched their own search for the missing sisters, frustrated by the slow police response. After the police watchdog this week criticised that initial response as below standard, Scotland Yard Commissioner Cressida Dick offered an apology to the family. The victim's mother said the time for apologies had long gone.
I've never been one to cast a whole organisation by one particular sort of incident, but we do have a problem. We do have an underground that has infiltrated and growing in our Met Police. But once again, I want to say thank you to this team that worked tirelessly to find the killer. The hours that they put in, and you know when someone's just doing a job and when they're invested. Well, so many people have become invested in this story.
An articulate woman of incredible dignity. It's yet another worryingly uncomfortable moment for the Met boss. Detectives pieced together Danielle Hussein's movements in the days before the murders. CCTV showed him in an Asda supermarket buying the block of knives that he would use in the attack. And in a search of his mother's home, police uncovered a far more sinister aspect to this crime: satanic symbols in his bedroom. And nearby, a handwritten letter. It was a deal with the devil, a promise to kill 6 women every 6 months, and it was signed with his own blood. In return, he believed that he would win the lottery and have better luck with women. As horrific as this crime undoubtedly was, for the sisters' family and friends, there was the added trauma of learning the 2 police officers who'd been guarding the scene were themselves investigated and later charged with taking unauthorised pictures of the victims. Those two officers are due to appear at the Old Bailey next week. Their lawyers have indicated they intend to plead guilty. It's not known why the sisters were targeted. Tragically, they may simply have been in the wrong place at the wrong time when Hussein discovered them. Let's go to our Home Affairs and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, in all of your years reporting, there can't have been a worse story than this one.
It is certainly a horrific story, there's no doubt about it. And that's bizarre as well in terms of the motivation here. This young man who was arrogant throughout, even today, sitting in the court. He was in a video link from Belmarsh Prison, sitting in a chair sideways on to the camera, refusing to look into the camera, to stand when the judge asked him to. He was looking out of the window. That is the kind of individual and the behaviour that he exhibited throughout the trial back in July that the family have had to sit through. It is a horrific case and compounded by the failings of the police service here. We have, of course, the issue around the way in which the police responded to the initial missing persons reports. There were multiple calls from the family of the two sisters and from friends of the two sisters reporting them missing. It was a lacklustre response at best, so much so in fact the family mounted their own search, and it was Nicole Smallman's boyfriend who discovered the two bodies stabbed dozens of times in the bushes. Absolutely horrific trauma he will live with for the rest of his life. And Mina Smallman, as you alluded to there, just refusing to accept the apology from Cressida Dick over that, because she says the time for apologies is over. She is really bitter about the way in which the force handled not only that initial missing persons investigation, but also this upcoming case that we're going to hear on Tuesday of next week. Mina Smallman will be back in court for that, where we are going to hear from these two police officers. We expect that they are going to plead guilty, and if they do, she'll be back out in the steps of the court, and I think she will have some very harsh words to say for the Metropolitan Police and, of course, the woman at the top, Cressida Dick.
Well, yes. I mean, do you think that eventually the pressure will be felt on Cressida Dick? And do you think that this awful crime and this awful verdict will provoke a further loss of confidence in policing in this country?
Well, there's certainly a loss of confidence is there, there's no doubt. And you would think that perhaps this has reached a tipping point as far as Cressida Dick is concerned. But then we thought that over the Sarah Everard murder, a murder committed by one of her own officers, and then the subsequent handling of the demonstrations, the protests and the vigil that took place in Sarah Everard's name. A lot of criticism of the Met Commissioner over that. She refused to resign. In fact, she just a few weeks ago had her contract extended by the Home Secretary and the London Mayor for another couple of years. So she certainly intends to stay on. She thinks she's got an important job to do. She has got an important job to do, of course she has. But the events and the criticism just keeps on coming, and it will come again, as I say, on Tuesday. And also, there are two other separate cases going through the courts at the moment. We can't say an awful lot about them because they are cases that are active, but they involve two police officers in separate incidents who have been accused of raping women, who have denied those charges and who will face trial in the months ahead.
For your coverage of this appalling story. That was our Home Affairs and Security editor, Mark White. Now, former Lib Dem leader Vince Cable, the man who predicted the credit crunch, one of the most respected and experienced politicians of his generation, is live in the studio for tonight's big question. So, he's going to give his verdict on the budget. He's looked at the books, and what does he think? Is Britain broke? Have you got a question for this very experienced public figure? Mark at gbnews.uk. You can ask about the Lib Dems, you can ask about Brexit, you can ask about the coalition government. Mark at gbnews.uk. Tweet us at GBNews. Facebook your question by searching for GB News, but after the break, Darren Grimes on the government's green agenda. Who pays for it? See you in 2. My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point.
Earlier in the show, we spoke to an American professor who thinks that Britain should be sharing more of its GDP in international aid. And we spoke to Rupert Lowe, the broadcaster and businessman, who thinks the opposite. However, the professor was also very critical of Brexit. But a response from Mark, and he says, "Hi, Mark. You're scraping the bottom of the barrel with the woke, nutty professor from the country that loses all wars it starts, uses its allies like crap, and emits enough carbon dioxide to kill off 2 moon-sized planets. What a wally." And that's what I love about you guys. You don't pull your punches. Keep those emails coming in. Fantastic to have your company. A brilliant 2 hours to come. And let's talk about this. Is the government using the same tactics it did over COVID lockdowns to try to push the green agenda? Let's speak to our very own, the fabulous Mr. Excellent himself. It is Darren Grimes. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Mark. Yes, so now Patrick Vallance has come out and, instead of saying let them eat cake, Mark, the maxim we hear now is let them eat salad. So I'm afraid to say we're all going to have to get used to that. And I dare say that anyone who's had steak and chips tonight shouldn't get used to the fact, because they want us to ditch the salad for the salad. It's all pretty extraordinary.
Yes, and the problem is, Darren, that we're going to have the same line about climate change as we've received about COVID, which is, in inverted commas, the science. But the science is not settled on whether eating nut burgers is going to save the planet.
Yeah, well, quite. Whilst China is burning through coal at a rate of knots, it's just an extraordinary idea that if I give up my steak and chips, right, that it's going to combat the global CO2 emissions to any real meaningful extent. I mean, what gets me, Mark, is that on everyone from Harry and Meghan, you've got Joanna Lumley comments this week, even Prince Charles waxing lyrical on this stuff. You've got a well-off elite who enjoy, I think it's fair to say, a life that most of us can only dream of obtaining, who reckon they can now lecture us on what we should eat and, frankly, if we dare enjoy a holiday and all of these other things. And I find it patronising would be putting it mildly, actually. It's hysterical and, in certain cases, I think hypocritical from a moneyed private jet elite, right? And with Sir Patrick Vallance, as you say rightly, so much has already been done as far as curtailing our freedoms and liberties in the name of following the science. But the thing that gets me is that I think, Mark, that this is an intensely political intervention, because this is a well-paid government advisor, paid for by the taxpayer, talking about backing the immiseration of the British people through the green agenda, right? And telling us that we have to forego cheaper food, foreign holidays, eating meat, driving our cars, heating our homes with gas boilers, and so on and so forth. So I actually think that it's deeply irresponsible for the chief scientific advisor to actually come out and back and endorse this climate alarmism, right?
Yes.
Because we've seen, haven't we, Mark, that you have been leading the charge on all of this stuff and calling out the authoritarian, illiberal tendencies of government officials. And as you know, things like mask mandates have been used to actually nudge our behaviour. People weren't saying actually the masks were great deterrents of contracting the virus, but they were good at reminding us that in being, covering our faces, we'd be constantly reminded of the virus. And I actually think that these sorts of tactics, these sort of nudges to our behaviour, are going to be recommended by in pandering to the sort of Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion green extreme. So I really think it needs to be called out, Mark. It needs to actually be scrutinised, because that's one thing I think we can all agree on, that as far as the political class is concerned, you've got Sir Vince Cable on later. He is a big proponent of all of this green stuff, a big proponent of basically exporting our energy-intensive industries, Mark, all the way over to China, only to import the goods and things that we need from there at a greater cost of CO2 as far as the world's emissions are concerned. It's none of it is joined up thinking. So that's why I'm deeply troubled actually by government advisors coming out and
There's also another problem,
stuff.
Darren, which is that the last time I checked, Sir Patrick Vallance, and we can both agree this is not personal. I'm sure he's a very decent guy and he's clearly a very illustrious man, but he's not elected, is he?
No, absolutely. And I think that's the one problem with letting the lockdown genie out of the bottle, right? In allowing these sort of technocrats to realise that they wield these quite extraordinary powers over our lives, and just how compliant we all are, actually, that they can dictate to us like pawns on a sort of chess set what we must do to satisfy their latest green dream pet projects. I mean, I was actually struck by something else Vallance said. He said that we mustn't rely on technology, and instead we need to adopt a sort of miserablist, hippie, herbivore lifestyle to combat emissions in a country that, as I say, is responsible for less than 1% of global CO2 emissions. If you look at global CO2 emissions on a chart, Mark, you cannot see Britain, right? You cannot see Britain. It is so small as far as global CO2 emissions is concerned. So as I say, me giving up steak and chips isn't going to stop China burning coal or eating bats, right?
Well, listen, Darren, I don't want you to give up the steak and chips because I want some meat on those bones. Because you're wasting away, as my mother would say. You've got hollow legs. But you really are one of my favourite commentators, and I can't wait to catch up in a week's time. Brilliant stuff, Darren. Check out Darren's brilliant channel. It's called Reasoned UK, very popular, and you'll discover why if you give it a watch on YouTube. It's exactly 10 o'clock. Coming up, the big question with one of the best-known politicians in the country, former Liberal Democrat leader Sir Vince Cable. So much more to come. We've also got Uncancelled with a former top Donald Trump advisor. Why is Joe Biden now going to raise taxes in the United States? All of that to come. Don't forget, Vince Cable next, mark@gbnews.uk for your questions. But first, here's Polly with the headlines.
Good evening. This is your GB News update. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, says the last 7 countries remaining on the UK's red travel list will be removed from next Monday. That means Peru, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Colombia, Haiti, Panama and Venezuela will no longer face the toughest travel restrictions, including hotel quarantines. However, Mr. Shapps says the red list category will remain in place as a precautionary measure. Meanwhile, coronavirus restrictions in Wales are due to be strengthened. That's in a bid to curb the highest levels of infection there. At the next review, the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, will reintroduce some measures, including guidance around self-isolation. Adults and young people aged 5 to 17 will soon be asked to isolate until they receive a negative PCT test if someone in their household has symptoms or tests positive. COVID infection rates in Wales are currently the highest in the UK. The mother of 2 sisters who were killed by a teenager has vowed to stop him ever being released from prison. 19-year-old Daniel Hussein fatally stabbed Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman last June after he'd said he'd made a pact with the devil. He's been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 35 years. The Met Police Commissioner Cressida Dick apologised after an independent report found the force's initial response had been below the standard it should have been. Mina Smallman paid tribute to her daughters after the sentencing.
I think you've heard me say in the past there'll be no celebrations here, but justice has been done. But I think we do need to review that kind of separation. When is someone an adult? And I think it's very disrespectful to say that children can't tell the difference between good and evil.
The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has summoned the French ambassador after France threatened to impose sanctions on British fishing vessels after a trawler was detained today. French authorities say 2 British ships were fined during checks off the coast of Le Havre yesterday. It's the latest escalation in the dispute between Britain and France over fishing rights. The Environment Secretary, George Eustace, says threats to block and tighten checks on British boats from French ports could be in breach of international law. Now, a 36-year-old man who sent a malicious email to the Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner has been spared jail. Benjamin Iliffe was sentenced to 15 weeks in prison, suspended for 18 months. During his sentencing, the court was told that Iliffe had felt angry after Rayner's use of the term Tory scum at the Labour Party conference. Following the verdict, Miss Rayner posted on Facebook saying she'll continue to speak her mind, but she will be more careful about the language she uses. The number of referrals made by schools to social services regarding vulnerable children fell 31% during the pandemic. According to the Department for Education, just under 36,000 referrals were made in the year ending March 31st, 2021. It said this reflects the restrictions on school attendance during parts of the year, with the majority of students being homeschooled. You're right up to date. I'm back in an hour.
So, should we be going plant-based to save the planet? That was the topic of my monologue. And I'm delighted to say I've received an email from, let's have a look at the name, Michael. Michael, thank you so much for your email. Michael says, Mark, I enjoy watching your programme. I was surprised there was no mention of fish and seafood. In the old days, a posh meal was always 4 courses: starter, fish, meat, pudding. Indeed, a favourite starter was prawn cocktail. We are an island nation, and during World War II, fish and seafood were never rationed. It's only recently that the products of intensified land food production have taken over. So, if we were to replace some of our meat meals with fish or seafood, we would do our mental health a favour, and incidentally, our heart health as well, and help the planet into the bargain. Well, Michael, I'm all for eating fish, and I've got to say, I've got the most excellent local fishmonger who does fabulous trout and king prawns, so I'm with you on that one. It's time now for the big question, where you get to quiz top celebrities, public figures, decision makers and sports people via my personal email address, mark@gbnews.uk. Sir Vince Cable was one of the only people to predict the credit crunch in 2008. He's an expert on the economy with a big business brain, and he served as business secretary during a time of great financial pressure for the country. I think he showed leadership at a time when the country really needed it. I'm an unadulterated fan. I'm delighted to welcome Liberal Democrat leader, formerly, and former MP for Twickenham, Vince Cable. Hello, Vince.
Hi.
It says on my script you're still the Lib Dem leader, but I don't think you are.
I was retired a few years ago.
Yeah. Do you miss it?
Sometimes, yeah, but I enjoy the freedom to get up whenever I feel like it and do things I want to do and say things which would be considered outrageous if I was still in Parliament.
And you're that rare thing, a Liberal Democrat that's been in power.
Yes, I think it'll happen again. We're rebuilding, but it was a remarkable episode in British history, the coalition government, and it had its critics from left and right, but actually it provided Britain with 5 years of stable government in a financial crisis.
How bad were things when you entered power in 2010 compared to where we are now?
I think worse, but certainly very different. I mean, what had happened, we'd had a complete collapse of the banking system. Britain had some of the biggest banks in the world. They'd gone down. They had to be nationalised to save the collapse of the whole system. Britain was very exposed to loss of confidence. Interest rates on government debt were much higher than they are today. I mean, it was a critical situation. To give credit to Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling, they had dealt with the crisis well, I think.
Yeah.
But it needed sustained treatment. And of course, one of the problems I had, the business secretary, is that we were trying to get the private sector moving again, but banks were not lending. They were just shoring up their balance sheets. So traditional Keynesian type policy didn't work, and we're having to do things in a different way.
Was it stressful or exhilarating to be business secretary at a time like that?
Well, it was very stressful, but it was exhilarating in the sense that we did some things which have, I think, stayed the course of time. I mean, we had what we call an industrial strategy. It did good work for the automotive industry, aerospace.
And we've seen big investment in the automotive industry
and it flowed from that.
Including since Brexit.
And setting up, we had a network of things that were called catapults, which have done a great deal to bring the private sector and the public sector together in supporting innovation, particularly in small business. So, there are a whole lot of things that we introduced. The British Business Bank, which is something I set up, actually kept us going through the pandemic. That was the main channel by which credit got into business during the pandemic.
So the deficit was colossal at the time. I think at its height it was something like a 10% as a share of GDP.
Yeah.
And through austerity, which is a sort of much debated policy, it managed to get down to, I think, around 2% as a share of GDP.
Yes.
And I guess that gave us the financial firepower with which to tackle this latest crisis.
Well, it certainly meant that we started in this crisis from a much stronger position than we could have been.
Do you know, can you think of roughly where we are now with the deficit as a percentage of GDP? It's got to be way above 10%.
Yeah, it got up to 15, but because it came down very sharply. And, well, there's a big difference. I mean, here in the pandemic, the government closed the economy down quite deliberately. So, business stopped working, people stopped earning income, tax revenue collapsed, and need was great. You had the universal credit that had to be bumped up, the furlough scheme. So there was an intentional deficit. It wasn't byproduct of
it was really policy
collapse of it was policy.
Because if you're going to shut the economy down, I mean, I personally am very worried about the impact that lockdowns have had, and I think I agree with some scientists, including Professor Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford Medical School, who thinks it was a mistake. But the bottom line is, if you're going to do that...
It's happened. But
exactly, and if you're going to make people stay at home, then you're going to have the furlough scheme.
Yeah, so we had to have this massive deficit temporarily, and it is now going down quite rapidly as you get a resumption of growth. The worry, of course, is that we now get into higher inflation than we can tolerate, which means the Bank of England will then introduce higher interest rates, which will then, dampen private sector activity, and all the growth forecasts of the budget will not be materialised. I mean, that's the big risk.
How might your budget yesterday have differed from that of the Chancellor Rishi Sunak? It was certainly a centre or centre-left budget, wasn't it? I mean,
think
if you looked at it out of context, it might have come from
to be
Gordon
fair,
Brown.
I think, to be fair, that's right, actually. It wasn't a great surprise because, all these tax increases were factored in some months ago.
That was the real budget.
And they're going to be, you know, and people have forgotten about this, but of course the thresholds for a lot of taxes have been frozen. They're going to kick in next year. The corporation tax at 25%, and then of course the health levy for social care.
Yeah.
So we've got these big tax increases coming in. They were pre-announced anyway. If there was a surprise, it was the size of the so-called windfall, which is not a real windfall. It's not actually sort of cash that's on the desk. It's because the forecasts are relatively optimistic that the government is going to get higher revenue than it thought it was going to get, and it's chosen to use that money to beef up public spending in areas that the Prime Minister in particular favours. So I think you're quite right. This is a centre-left budget. I think in the context, probably the right thing to have done. Yeah.
And what about austerity this time round? Do you think that it's not the right policy? And if we don't do austerity, is it because austerity has been discredited? Or is it because the circumstances are different?
I don't think it's been discredited. I think any government coming in 2010 would have had to do something
What was
fairly
the
similar.
difference? What was the difference then with now, that austerity is not appropriate now?
Well, first of all, Britain was very exposed. It was seen as a high-risk economy. Of course, we had a floating currency, unlike Italy, but we were potentially going to get caught up in that collapse of confidence after the banking crisis. That was one difference. The interest rates on government debt were higher, I think 3 to 4%.
I think that the interest on the debt at one point was around 60 billion a year, just the interest, which is the defence budget.
Yeah, and, you know, it's something you have to watch. It's not a problem at the moment, but, it could if we get back into high interest rate times. So that was another difference. And the other big difference was you couldn't just sort of pump money into the economy and get it moving again because the banks were not lending, companies couldn't expand even if they wanted to. We're in a very different situation. I mean, we could argue, and I think I would have done if I'd been Chancellor at the time, had a bit more tax relative to spending cuts. But, the idea of austerity, that we had to have a period of entrenchment for the budget deficit, was unavoidable and the right thing to have done. And I certainly don't disown that. I think what we could have done more public investment. I think Sunak's doing, 2.5% of GDP in his plans. Yeah. I think probably could be a bit higher given the government's ambition to rebuild infrastructure. I think my criticisms of the budget are on some of the detail. Just a small point that goes back to coalition days. I mean, George Osborne introduced a bank levy. That wasn't to raid the banks. It was a kind of insurance policy, and they're getting them to pay insurance in case they collapsed in future. Yeah. And that's been cut, supposedly to improve the competitiveness of the city, and that wasn't necessary. And
it's been seized on by Labour, so potentially a political own goal for the government.
Yeah, it's a small thing in the public.
But I think you're right to point that out, because it's important that the banks have their house in order, because they were so undercapitalised during the credit crunch.
They've improved their capitalisation.
And the Bank of England ordered them to basically fill their coffers.
Yeah, the regulation has made them, they're much more robust.
I mean, if we'd had this financial crisis now and the banks didn't have the capital, I mean, that would have been game over, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but it's not smart to cut your house insurance. That's what we're doing. And I think the other thing was that he was a bit more ambitious than people expected on the universal credit taper. It's a very technical subject, but it's effectively the marginal tax rate paid by people who go into work when they're on benefit. And it's now 55%. It used to be 60-odd. Now, if people on high incomes were paying marginal tax of 55%, you'd never hear the end of it.
Yeah.
But it's a big disincentive to low earners to do more work, take on extra hours and so on.
Yeah, so that's a step in the right direction. And you are the sage of the city. Well, you did outline the circumstances by which there would be a problem for economies like ours. And you spoke about the credit crunch, you anticipated it. So what are your thoughts about the future, the medium and long-term future of the British economy? Are the fundamentals of the economy such that we can recover from this and bounce back?
Well, if you look at the numbers from yesterday, the government, via the Office of Budget Responsibility, isn't itself all that optimistic, actually. Their underlying growth rate's about 1.5%, which is pretty dire.
Do you trust the OBR? I mean, do you think they're
they're an independent body. None of us know.
Do they have credibility?
But there's a big gap between the assumptions that that have been made about the future, which is for very modest growth, because, and the Prime Ministers talk about high wages and high productivity. And if you could get high wages and high productivity, that would be great. But how do we get there? There's a big gap in credibility, and that's what worries me, that, because we're building up expectations of, rebuilding the north of England and depressed communities and so on, and a bit of money's gone into them, and I welcome that. But to sustain it, you need productivity growth.
So I think that you'd suggest that there isn't necessarily a crash coming, but that sort of raging growth is a pipe dream at this stage.
And although it's probably you disagree with me, but Brexit, it's not a catastrophe, but it is a bit of a slow puncture. And one of the little lines in the budget, which not too many people have picked up, is that net exports are going to decline in the next few years because we've lost access to a big market. It's not a massive impact, but it's negative. It's a kind of drag on the economy.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Brexit, and I'm going to come to questions from my brilliant viewers. But we've got something in common. We're both Remainers.
Oh, well, I'm pleasantly surprised. I was expecting you to come firing back at me.
No, I married a German, so that's commitment to the cause. But I accepted the result straight away, and I can see the advantages of Britain as a global trading nation, and also an insurance policy against having the euro or being part of a European army and other such projects. So I'm confident that, in time, global Britain will be a great success. And I think you've been very anodyne on the subject of Brexit yourself. Do you regret that your party, after you ceased to be leader, was so vociferous against the result? Because I wonder whether you might have accrued more votes if your party had been more temperate about the result and accepted it.
Well, I think once the government had decided to pull us out of the single market and the customs union, which was, a more radical option than a lot of Brexit voters wanted, I think to ask for a confirmatory referendum was quite reasonable. You could argue that simply revoking it was a step too far.
Which was the policy, wasn't it, going into the last...
Well, it did alienate people, for sure. Yeah. But anyway, as far as I'm concerned, Brexit's happened.
Yeah.
I think, we're going to need to work back to a more constructive relationship with the European Union.
And the Lib Dems won't sort of suggest re-entering the European Union or anything like that?
Well, not tomorrow.
Wait a minute. That was a politician's answer. I thought you were an ex-politician.
Well, I am. But,
you just gave me a very circumspect
No, I was just teasing. But no, I think we are going to need to rebuild the close economic integration. But what I do...
If you're a leader, you'd have to say, by the way, folks, we're not going back in.
Well, I think we will rebuild some kind of relationship. It won't be re-entering as before. It will be a different kind of relationship. But I think it needs to be more substantial than we've got. But, global Britain, I'm all for us looking out towards Asia.
Yeah.
I think that's good. If we join this new Trans-Pacific Partnership, I think that's a positive step. Of course, China will be joining at the same time. And I'm all in favour of building up relationships with the big emerging markets, whether it's India or China or the rest of that region.
OK, well, let's get to some of your questions. And Faye, can we go to Finley first, if you don't mind? This is a question from Finley, who has emailed mark@gbnews.uk. Lots of questions in for you, Sir Vince.
Okay.
Finley asks, do you think the Liberal Democrats could re-enter government in the future with a Labour PM?
I think re-entering government is probably too big a call. I think we're burnt by the last experience. But I think the general instinct of the party as we rebuild, as I think we will be to try and think in national interest terms. I mean, one of the great problems of British politics is it's become very tribal. We're not as bad as the United States, but it is very tribal. And the idea of people collaborating between parties, it's regarded as a kind of treachery.
Yeah.
And you can't run a country like that.
No, that's really sad.
So I think, if whether it could be Conservative or Labour, asks for the support of a minority party, then I think you have a duty to be constructive. Probably doesn't involve getting back into government, but I think being supportive.
Well, look, I mean, it's just my opinion, and plenty of people, maybe most people watching will disagree, but I think that the Liberal Democrats acted in the national interest when they formed the coalition in 2010. I think they paid a political price, but I think the country should thank them and thank the Tories as well for having quite a united administration. I think, ironically, the administration of the coalition was rather more united than the previous Labour one.
Yes, we had some quite fierce arguments in private, but
there wasn't the soap
resolved
opera,
them.
was there?
No, there wasn't.
It wasn't the Blair Brown, you know.
Well, yes, that was a different
melodrama.
Melodrama, yeah.
How about this from Harry Vince, who asks, "Do you regret the Bollocks to Brexit slogan?"
No, I think people often talk about politicians as being too waffly and evasive. You know, we had taken up quite a strong position on Brexit, as you know, and as we just discussed.
Yeah.
And it was just expressing it in 3 crude words, if you like. So I don't regret it. It served its purpose at the time. I think moving on...
We're still talking about it.
Moving on to revoking was probably a step too far. But, you know, speaking in oath... I actually got the slogan from Pimlico Plumbers. I don't know whether you know them.
Of course I do. Charlie Mullins.
Charlie Mullins. Yes, we visited him, and he's a great guy, and he had this slogan up in his building. So I thought, well, OK, we'll pinch it.
We did have a question from another viewer, and we've only got a few seconds, really.
Right,
but the question was, do you know what the next big financial crisis will be? Will there be one, or can we have a few years of calm now, do you think?
Well, I think on the financial side, probably a few years of relative calm. I mean, there are big problems in emerging markets who borrowed quite heavily during the pandemic, probably didn't have the strength in international markets to sustain it. So I think some of the big Latin American countries going pop, we could see that happening in the next few years. China's struggling with a lot of corporate debt, but they're very tough operators. I think they'll probably get on top of it. But in this country, I think we've got our problems, but I don't think the financial institutions are now particularly vulnerable.
So are you retired now? You're an academic, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm an academic. I'm a visiting professor at the LSE and other universities. I'm writing books, latterly on China. I'm involved in a couple of startup companies, one of which is trying to get hydrogen into the system for lorries.
Great idea.
So
clean fuel and, zero emissions and quite safe.
And it's all commercial. We're not looking for government money. Business, writing, academic, keeping up my dancing lessons.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good existence.
We've seen you on the dance floor.
Yeah.
You have very, what can I say? You're agile, aren't you?
So far,
silky smooth.
So far.
Did you enjoy Strictly?
It was a winter show. It wasn't a series.
It wasn't the full thing, but I mean, it's still because I did Let's Dance for Comic Relief, which was just a few days, but it still physically knackered me.
Yeah, well, I've had a lesson this afternoon.
Have you really? So you're still doing the foxtrot?
Very much so, yeah. So I'm aching all over, but it's
is that right? So is that exercise?
Good for me.
You do that as exercise?
Exercise, but it's mental as well as physical, actually.
Yeah, of course it is. Remember,
you've got to really concentrate.
Harder than PMQs.
Yeah, actually, in some ways.
Well, look, Sir Vince Cable, thank you so much for joining us. Do come and see us again soon. Lovely to have you in the studio. Coming up, we'll have all of tomorrow's front pages, including a Tom Hanks wedding faux pas. You won't want to miss that. But first, are the woke brigade going to totally erase our entire history? Commentator and broadcaster Emma Webb is joining me to discuss that in The Outsider. A slavery abolitionist is now being cancelled. Explain that one. We'll find out about details of that in 2. My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Should we go plant-based to save the planet? You've been emailing in your hundreds. Thank you so much. Every email is fantastic. I read all of them. Don't get all of them aired, but let's get to James, who says, "Hi, Mark. I'm 76 years old. I smoked Capstan full-strength fags for 28 years. I drank and continue to drink more beer than is supposedly good for me. I eat meat like it's going out of fashion. I still have all my hair, all my original teeth. I don't need glasses. James, you sound gorgeous. You're a babe." James goes on to write, "I also eat the hottest curry I can get or cook. But I'm concerned for animal welfare and worry about cows, pigs and chickens. So what are those poor animals going to eat when all of the nut jobs and vegans have eaten all the grass and nuts? Will we have to teach them to eat vegans?" Oh my goodness, that's what I call a food chain. James, thank you for your hilarious and brilliant email. Do keep them coming, but it's time now for The Outsider, our brand new section where some of our favourite GB News commentators have the chance to sound off on an important issue to them that's being ignored by the rest of the media. Imperial College London has been told to remove a bust of slavery abolitionist Thomas Henry Huxley because he might now be called racist following a review into colonial links. An independent history group for the Russell Group University has recommended that a bust of the renowned 19th century biologist dubbed Darwin's bulldog because of his help forming the theory of evolution be taken down and the Huxley building on campus be renamed. Well, to get reaction, I'm delighted to welcome a very good friend of mine, Emma Webb. Hi, Emma, how are you?
Good evening, Mark.
Great to see you. And Emma, you're going to have to explain this to me. This is an abolitionist, somebody that campaigned for the abolition of slavery who is now problematic. I need some help with that.
Well, Imperial College, no less. Top points to them for not trying to rename themselves. I've actually got a quote here from Thomas Huxley himself. He wrote saying, "No slavery can be abolished without a double emancipation, and the master will benefit by freedom more than the freed man." So he was obviously a man who had given quite a lot of attention to the issue of emancipation. And I think that hopefully we will see historians, as we have done on many other issues, coming out and myth-busting some of this, because it's not just about Thomas Huxley. As you say, he was referred to as Darwin's bulldog. And if we remember, it's not that long since the Natural History Museum itself was talking about changing displays and auditing Darwin's exhibitions, things that he'd taken from the Galapagos Islands. So this isn't something that is particularly new, nor is it surprising that they're going for somebody who was also an abolitionist. They say that one of the reasons why that this is the case, obviously this is a very well-known scientist. He was an anthropologist, a comparative anatomist, I think, as well. And he wrote a famous a paper that they refer to in this called, on the subject of emancipation. And they say that in that he espouses, this is a quote, espouses a racial hierarchy of intelligence. And they said, and the quotes in this are very important, they said it falls far short of imperial's modern values. So again, as we've seen in many other cases, they are attempting to edit historical figures in light of the values of the present. And as I say, it's not only Huxley, it's a number of other figures as well, philanthropists, two brothers called Otto and Alfred Beit, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, and they were in South Africa diamond and gold merchants. They formed a company with another gentleman whose bust and names as well, in statues as well as the names of lecture halls, Imperial College are now discussing removing. But what is so interesting about this is the way in which they're suggesting doing this. They're talking about potentially moving these into what they say could be possibly be a museum or, quote, you'll love this, Mark, interpretation space. And the president of the university has said, we stand for openness, transparency and freedom of speech. And that will define this dialogue. But it seems to be the classic doublespeak again. So they're saying that they stand for freedom of speech and openness, whilst at the same time making it quite clear that they are judging the figures of the past, including those who were very generous in donating money to them just because they don't agree with aspects of their thought in light of their modern values.
Yes, and in this interpretation space, the exhibits will be interpreted on your behalf by woke professors. Emma, I've got two adjectives to describe the situation: sad and cruel, to discredit, in so many cases, truly remarkable former British people.
I absolutely agree with you. And there's another list of individuals that they are going for in this review. One of them is a man whose name is Ronald Fisher, and Ronald Fisher has been hailed as one of the most important statisticians in history. So these are people who, even if you disagree with certain aspects of their history, of their interaction historically with South Africa, with the South African economy, we've seen this in many cases. Some of these individuals were friends of Cecil Rhodes, someone who has just received a plaque actually at Oriel College in Oxford, which is, I would say, quite a biased plaque. So it is the case that these plaques themselves are going to be viewed through a particular lens. And I think what is most interesting about this is that we're seeing the direction that this is taking. So now the universities are trying to essentially justify these actions by saying, as one of the provost of the university has said, that they're insisting that this isn't a cover-up, that this isn't cancel culture, because they're suggesting reinterpretation, moving it into this possible interpretation space, even redesigning some of the monuments. And I think it's quite clear that this is just doublespeak, that this is cancel culture. They're just trying to find ways of doing it in a way that is slightly more, shall we say, lateral than simply pulling the statues down and removing them from public view entirely, but it is still viewing them through one particular lens. And as you say, it shows an ingratitude to the philanthropists who donated money to the university in the first place. I think that they should be taking a look at their own behaviour in the present rather than trying to pick apart and excavate the people who have donated money to them in the past.
And people, as you've mentioned, who had revered careers and made a huge contribution to this country, often to the colleges and universities that then gave them statues. And perhaps the worst example is Winston Churchill. And we know he was a complex and flawed man, but he was also a strategic genius and a man of remarkable moral courage. This is the man that stopped Hitler, one of the greatest monsters in history. And to desecrate the memory of someone like Churchill or these others is a sin. I actually think it's a sin.
I think it also suggests something very rotten in the way that we're thinking. And it's not just to do with our approach to history, it's to do with our approach to each other as well. It's this new culture of forgiveness. It is what James Lindsay has called applied critical theory. And I think that's exactly what this is. It's a desire to continuously excavate the sins of the past and the present, in this attempt to move us towards a particular vision of the future. And it's one that doesn't allow for dissent, it doesn't allow for forgiveness, it doesn't allow for repentance. And I think that you're right here that it has some kind of moral bearing on us as a culture, and particularly when it comes to figures like Winston Churchill, the ultimate anti-fascist, you might say. And there have been many.
Well, you say that it doesn't allow for forgiveness and repentance. It doesn't allow for thanks. To thank these people for what they did.
It doesn't allow for gratitude, and it also doesn't allow for facts as well as thanks, because as many historians have pointed out, a lot of these criticisms of historical figures, not only are they biased or they only focus partially on one aspect of their history, but they're also misleading and slanderous. You wouldn't be able to talk about a living figure in that way. It would be defamatory. And so there have been many historians, the brilliant project Reclaiming History, which has united historians, not just within Europe, but also within Britain, but also outside of Britain as well, who have come together to actually lay out the facts about these historical figures, including people like Sir Winston Churchill and including people like Cecil Rhodes. And some of these figures might have ambiguous histories, and you might be able to discuss the morality of some aspects of their trading or their investment. But ultimately, we need to have a rounded, holistic view of history that isn't this sort of ideologically infused filter through which we see everything, not only in the past, but also in the present.
I think you've nailed it. I think that these people are being libelled from the grave. And I'll just give you an example, right? Because you've got to place all of these individuals in the context of history. I bank with Barclays. Now, don't worry, Tom, you don't have to panic, because I'm going to say that Barclays is a fabulous bank. And they do a great job. And I think I've been with them since I was about 16. And let me tell you that they had business dealings with South Africa in the 80s. And lots of customers campaigned for Barclays to not work with apartheid South Africa. And in the end, they ended that relationship. They curtailed those transactions. But, I'm sure probably all the other high street banks did business as well with apartheid South Africa. And the point is that happened. And that was a period in history when, of course, you had, the apartheid situation in South Africa, a horrific situation. But businesses did deal with South Africa at that time. And we learn and we develop and we move on. But I don't want to see Barclays Bank cancelled for that.
And there are universities in the present, for example, Cambridge University as well, who wanted to get rid of the campaign to get rid of the Rustat Memorial of Tobias Rustat at one of the colleges there, whilst also having been in the press of various universities doing deals with China, which we know are responsible for gross human rights offences in the present. So there's an element of hypocrisy to this as well, that I think seems to go unnoticed. And as we've seen with other institutions across the board, the British Library, the British Museum, as I say, even the V&A, all across the board, we've seen people like Mendelssohn, Beethoven being clumped in with white supremacy, because this is an expansive ideology, an expansive ideological way of viewing things that sees all historical figures from a particular period of our history as being complicit in oppression. And that is simply because of the historical framework that they're applying to the past.
Always brilliant to talk, Emma. Let's catch up really soon. Emma Webb, broadcaster and commentator, The Outsider. She returns in a week's time. Is Joe Biden's vow to make billionaires cry with a new tax on the super rich fair? We'll speak to American political strategist Errol Moorcock. He's a man who has advised Donald Trump. He's in Uncancelled at 11. But next, in the media buzz, are we outraged enough about pollution in our own waters? Folks, is it safe to go swimming in this country? We'll discuss that after this.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point.
Time to look at the big stories of the day and tomorrow's newspaper headlines in our media buzz. And let's start with a paper flick, as they call it in the biz. Let's start with the Metro. Kick in the scallops. France sees UK ship as Macron reignites Brexit fishing battle. France has kicked off a new post-Brexit fishing war by seizing a British trawler and threatening to use force to grab more licences for itself. Nigel Farage told me on this programme just a couple of days ago that there is trouble brewing from the French. So watch this space. In the eye, return of the squeezed middle. Low and middle income households face real pain and lower living standards following the budget, warns an economic think tank. Combination of high inflation, rising taxes and poor growth set to knock the middle 60% who are predicted to suffer average income falls of 2%. In a blow to those with mortgages, major lenders, including HSBC, Barclays and NatWest, increased the cost of borrowing yesterday. The Bank of England are under pressure to raise interest rates next week. Let me offer a word of caution on this one. I don't think we should panic. Every financial expert I've spoken to has suggested that interest rates will creep up a bit, but that they are predicted to be historically low for the next 10 years. So let's be reassuring, shall we? We don't do Project Fear here at GB News, and certainly not on my watch. Now, the Daily Express, let's have a look at this. E-cigarettes on the NHS to save lives. Cigarettes could soon be prescribed on the NHS to help smokers kick the habit. What a waste of time. Can I recommend the Alan Carr book? It's brilliant. Not the comedian, but the smoking expert. It's called The Easy Way to Stop Smoking. I don't own any shares in Alan Carr, but I've got to tell you, I read that book and never looked at a cigarette again.
Mark, can I say I totally disagree? I quit with e-cigs. I am now 4 months clean.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's get some cameras on this. Come on, Faye.
Also, I mean...
Come on, let's have a wide shot.
As somebody who's quit smoking, all I now want to talk about is that I quit smoking.
Forget the papers.
Yeah, I know I went e-cigs. I did an e-cig for about a month and a half, and it's not fun like smoking. It's not cool like smoking.
Yeah.
It just weans you off the actual chemical addiction.
I think you're rare, though.
No, they're embarrassing. Nobody wants to be seen with a vape. They're lame.
Is that it? So it's your vanity that really saved you?
Smoking is incredibly cool.
Did you go for the funky flavours?
I did not. I think that is for children, and I think it is wrong. I went for the tobacco-flavoured one like a grown-up.
Really? For me, the only reason to vape is to have strawberry mousse cigarettes.
Well, when I turn 85, I'm going to go back to smoking. I'm going to go back to Marlboro Lights, my favourite thing in the world.
Listen, when we're both really old, should we just be really bad?
Outside a pub with a packet of fags.
Take up loads of bad things.
Yes, that's the dream.
Well,
anyway, sorry to interrupt the papers.
Well, no, but hey, it is all about balance, and I'm really glad to hear that for you, vaping helped you get off fags. And if one anecdote has worked, then that gives me encouragement. So well done you, and well done them. So, OK, either Alan Carr or vaping. You choose. And then finally, The Telegraph. Johnson summons French ambassador over fish row. Diplomat to be rebuked after British scallop trawler captain is detained for unlicensed fishing. That e-cigarette story also in The Telegraph as well. EU border force could stop Afghan migrants. And Mark Zuckerberg renames Facebook Meta. There we are. Brilliant stuff. Well, lots more to come. With me, my panel, you've just heard from her, the cigarette-free, tobacco-free Rebecca Reid. Her body's a temple.
Well, full of bread and wine.
Andrew Doyle, who I think is, as I've said earlier, a very well-adjusted and excellently upholstered young man. Andrew Doyle is the host of Free Speech Nation, of course, broadcaster, comedian and entertainer, agent provocateur.
Okay.
And political commentator and writer Dominique Samuels. Dominique, I won't waste any adjectives on you.
Thank you. She doesn't need it. She's too cool for that.
She is too cool. She rises above adjectives.
You're better than that.
Over the last few weeks, the government has flip-flopped on its stance for our implementing of Plan B. Our current health secretary, makes it sound like he's on probation, doesn't it? Sajid Javid has insisted there are no plans yet, whilst our Prime Minister said he wasn't ruling anything out. It's the usual thing, isn't it? Good cop, bad cop. But now a former health secretary has urged Number 10 to impose restrictions should cases begin to rise, following Sir Patrick Vallence's call for reimposed restrictions at the first sign of infections rebounding. Jeremy Hunt told the government it should not be afraid of a U-turn if the situation worsens. He said, I think we need to be prepared to move to different ways to tackle the virus. I've always said, in a pandemic, you should welcome a government that changes its mind, not chastise it for U-turning. The former minister stopped short of calling for immediate restrictions, but his comments came as a symptom tracking study warned today that Britain is worryingly close to 100,000 cases a day and that government testing is underestimating the crisis. Andrew, Plan B, are you ready?
I'm really worried about this, insofar as I don't believe that we can ever go back into lockdown. I think we have to face the reality that this pandemic is, not this pandemic, but that the virus is here to stay. And we just have to learn to live with it. I don't understand why people can't grasp this. I mean, we've had these debates off and on for a long time now. Everyone surely now agrees at this point that it's going to be something we have to learn to live with. So,
You'd think so.
Well, these kind of draconian ideas, I also don't think people are going to tolerate it anymore, to be honest. I just don't think
your mate, Nick Dixon, he tweeted about this the other day. Brilliant comedian, of course, a regular.
Really great comedian.
Regular on Free Speech Nation. And he said that his mum has turned because, you know, his mother complied with all of the, you know, restrictions and she was obviously double jabbed. And he said that she's now thinking that she's going to check out, and he said that the government are losing the normies.
Well, this is my point, actually, is that everyone has a tipping point with this stuff, and there was a lot of goodwill early on, you know, because nobody wants anyone to die and everyone wants to protect the people
100%.
who are vulnerable. But when it comes to a point where the vast majority of people have been double jabbed, we know that if you have been double jabbed, then the risk of death is absolutely minimal. At this point, there cannot be any justification. I think it will completely tip more and more normies, as Nick says.
And I'm a normie. I'm your average.
You are far from normie.
First lockdown, I was out there clapping for the NHS, baking banana bread, thinking I was in the Blitz.
Record a podcast or two?
Oh, absolutely, totally. But it was a hard time because nobody wanted to talk about feminism anymore, and that was genuinely my career really tanked. But other than that,
I'd forgotten that feminism's totally over.
It was honestly, it was such a hard time. I had so much work, and then I had no work.
That would be a great title for a book.
People didn't give a... Yeah, people genuinely didn't care. Like, actually, it did massively negatively affect women, massively, but no one cared.
No, I care, and I think you're absolutely right.
But anyway, I was very good about lockdowns. I was very respectful. I didn't really break them. Or, you know, I was a bit naughty. I was in the park, maybe sat down, but I was pretty law-abiding. And my hobby was watching the truck drive through picnics. I used to go to the park at the weekend, and our local park, a little truck would drive very slowly through picnics of rule breakers. It was honestly, I really missed that. That was
it
great.
Like a little electric vehicle?
It was the park police. It was the park police, and they would like narcs. That was their job, just ruining people's picnics. Anyway, I digress. I don't think people will tolerate having their picnic run over by a park narc again.
No.
I think it was a specific time in our life, and I would be more careful. I don't mind having to wear a mask again. I'd do that if I'm asked. I'd rather be asked than told, but I wouldn't do a proper.
Well, they're pushing their luck on. I mean, that's the point.
Yeah,
If they say that it's voluntary, you know, if they say that, you know, we'll do another lockdown, but it is voluntary,
like Sweden for the last 2 years.
I'd be way more likely to do a lockdown if it was voluntary. Way more likely.
Yeah. Oh well, I think that's a really interesting point, and that was a psychology adopted by the Swedes throughout.
Mm-hmm. And it seems to have worked for them.
Because actually, you know, something to temper, because we're both very critical of lockdowns, aren't we, Dominique?
Yeah.
But if you want to throw a bone to those that believe that is the right measure, you could argue that Swedish people, in their millions, did stay home.
Yeah.
And they worked from home where possible, and some of them wore face coverings, but none of it was mandated. And perhaps that's the point of the pandemic now, where we let people judge the risk for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And even polling-wise, less and less people actually think that the current state of where we are actually warrants a lockdown. My concern isn't necessarily with the prospect of lockdown, although I am sceptical about that. Mine is the issue of this Plan B, which Jeremy Hunt has obviously inadvertently called for, which includes things like vaccine passports and mandatory masks and things like that. And there's no real comprehensive evidence that doing these things would make a substantial impact. We've seen it in Florida, we've seen it in Texas, we've seen it in so many countries.
Well, in the UK, Wales has the strictest measures at the moment.
Yeah, and
the
they
highest rates of COVID.
Yeah, they have a higher rate per 100,000 people.
Correct, and they've got mask mandates, working
and
from home.
COVID passports.
And
It clearly doesn't work. And even in this place called Waterford, a county in Ireland,
Beautiful
their
county.
population is 99.7% vaccinated, and they've had some of the highest case rates in Ireland.
Yeah.
So this idea that, you know, we need the boosters, we need this, we need that in order to keep us out of lockdown, I think it's a falsehood, and we need to let people make their own choices.
Really briefly, because Connor's going to absolutely eviscerate me if we don't crack on with the next bit of the media buzz, but counter to that, if the NHS is overwhelmed, you've got ambulances queuing outside A&E, people dying at home because they can't get an ambulance. At that point, you lock down?
No, I don't think so. And even
So you're going to let people die?
What do you do then? Even the government's own modelling has suggested that even without Plan B restrictions, it is unlikely that the NHS will be overwhelmed.
But what would you do in that? Genuinely, I'm asking, what do you think would be good to do in that situation?
What I would have done is make sure that we had that hospital capacity in terms of beds, and the government has actually failed to do that. I don't think because of a government failure, millions of people should have their lives destroyed.
So maybe get those Nightingale ones reopen or something?
Well, that's the thing, but the government didn't use them, and it's simply...
We didn't have enough doctors, which is slightly...
Exactly, but it's simply common sense. And if the government isn't doing these things, it can't expect people to uproot their whole lives and lose their livelihoods and die at home because of their incompetence.
Do you agree with the panel? Would you tolerate Plan B measures or another lockdown? Mark at gbnews.uk. Do let me know. I've got lots of emails coming and I'll get to them shortly. Really, really excited. We're going to talk about Gordon Ramsay, who has bitten back after the comments of Steve Allen, the broadcaster, about his daughter. And in Uncancelled at 11, why is Joe Biden rising taxes for the super rich? And what will that do to the economy? I'll speak to a top Washington insider. See you in 2. My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Lots of emails coming in. Peter has said, Mark, the government made it clear that the last remaining countries on the ED list have now been regraded down, meaning the virus threat is lessened. This makes the threat of Plan B an empty one, more fudge than nudge. Also, Declan, when we plan Plan B, we plan B. ZZZ, boring, boring, boring. Well, Declan, I couldn't agree with you more. Let's hope it doesn't happen again. Jack says, Mark, why should we lock down again when NHS consultants and nurses won't even all have the vaccine? A minority vaccinated NHS worker. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for your excellent work in the course of the pandemic, like all of your colleagues in the NHS. Finally, Mark has said, in the event of struggling with hospital capacity, all of the medical staff should be redeployed to Nightingale hospitals to care for COVID patients. And finally, Alison has said, hi, Mark, I totally agree with Dominique, my fave panellist, by the way, with Calvin.
Oh.
Well,
Thanks.
I've got to say, they're all my favourite.
Don't lie.
But Alison says, I'm 55 and paid national insurance every single month for 4 decades. Start using our money properly instead of wasting £37 billion on a ridiculous track and trace system that didn't work and still isn't working. Alison, I agree with you, and thanks for your email. More on the media buzz now with Rebecca Reid, Andrew Doyle and Dominique Samuels. Gordon Ramsay has given his take on his daughter's body-shaming spat with broadcaster Steve Allen. Occasionally they get bored of me in the gallery. They just whack a jingle. Connor's like, let's have a break, and I think we could all do with a break. But look, what did he say? He went on Instagram Live. He said his daughter Tilly's response to the LBC host, who described her as a chubby little thing after watching her on Strictly, had left him feeling proud. He was proud of his daughter for her response. Here's the clip.
I mean, completely aside from the book, just what she came out with the other day, I thought was absolutely brilliant. I was really massive respect for her. Anyway.
No, that's a good point. I mean, listen, it's been a tough one. She's 19 years of age, for goodness sake, busting her ass off and attending uni via Zoom and learning the most extraordinary moves with Nikita. So I think it was a breath of fresh air to see that level of stand up, and we're not going to tolerate that. And listen, it's a very sensitive issue, that whether you're a girl or a guy. And I'm someone that's always struggled with my weight, and so everyone says, how do you keep in shape now? I train. I have to keep fit. We eat all day. We pick. We graze. We're around food 24/7. You know what it's like. And so there's that level of discipline. And if we don't train, then I'd be 350, 400 pounds. So all credit to her. And it made me feel very proud that she just stood up and said, "Hey, I'm not going to tolerate that."
Steve, please feel free to voice your opinions, wrote Tilly Ramsay. However, I draw the line at commenting on my appearance. It's such a shame that someone is trying to make such a positive experience negative. Now, I've said that while I wouldn't have made those comments myself, I do respect Steve's right to free speech. And I will say I find Gordon's comments a bit rich for a man famed for his own mean comebacks. Take a listen to this.
Look at that. You guys, come here, you fat. Come here, all of you, come here. You go out there with this jacket. Hey, come here, you. If I tell you to get out there, I don't give a you got a thumb up, you fat crack. Get out there! Missy, come here, you fat mouth little stupid.
Yes, chef.
Dominique, what's fat crack?
I think he's absolutely hilarious. I'm sorry, I love Gordon Ramsay.
Well, yeah, but he's a hypocrite. Because he does his interview on Instagram Live, he's all groovy and touchy-feely and this is all terrible about my daughter, and then he verbally abuses other people.
That's complete false equivalent. Yeah, I think it's a bit different. One, he's going to be a bit biased because it's obviously his daughter, and two, that's his sort of character he does for his TV show.
What he's doing there is much worse. Dominique, what he's doing there is much worse than Steve Allen.
But they know what they're getting. It's Gordon Ramsay is known for having, a mean mouth. That's not the same.
Yeah, this is like people complaining about when Anne Robinson slags them off on The Weakest Link. That's what you go on.
And if you go on Gordon Ramsay's show, part of the fun of it is having him call you horrible names.
But Rebecca, let me defend Steve Allen, because Steve Allen
is an odious little man.
He's the Joan Rivers of this country.
He's not.
He described Gemma Collins as a shed.
He also called her Jabba the Hutt. That's not clever. That's not funny.
It is funny, but
And Andrew, you are the professional
That's not
comedian.
witty.
Can you please issue your verdict on Steve Allen, guilty or not guilty of being rude?
Well, I'm not familiar with his oeuvre. I don't know.
He's a funny.
He's a
funny
low
broadcaster.
I don't know anything, but I would.
talentless.
I would say the fact that I haven't heard of him would suggest that he's not the equivalent of Joan Rivers.
Ouch.
He's an absolute legend.
Ouch. Oh dear.
But I don't think. I mean, you know, I'm with Rebecca on this and Dominique. I think we all agree that when you're on Gordon Ramsay's show, then you know you expect that, and you don't expect someone just to slag off a teenager they don't know. I mean,
if you're on Strictly, you're there to have your dancing critiqued by judges, and if he said, "Look, her pas de double was a little lacking in talent, in excitement," fine.
he said she couldn't dance.
By the way, Mark. By the way,
chubby little thing is the issue that would.
He's allowed to say what he. No one is saying he shouldn't have been able to say it. No one's threatening his freedom of speech.
Everyone is.
No. If you criticise someone for something that they say, that's you exercising your freedom of speech.
Yeah, and Tilly Ramsay exercised hers, and Gordon's exercising his, and the fact that he's not a particularly talented broadcaster is nobody's fault. The irony, though, and I won't get into the specifics of how he looks, but the fact that he feels able to criticise anyone for their appearance is staggering.
I think we've had a sense of humour failure.
Trust me, if it was funny, I would laugh.
Steve Allen is a legendary broadcaster.
He's a loser.
He's been in radio.
He's a big lame loser.
But look,
with no
you
friends.
are entitled to call him a loser because that's what he would call.
I called him a big lame loser with no friends because he is.
There you go. Well, that's it. Look, as long as we can all have banter and it's two-way, then on that we can agree. Oh my goodness, who gave me this woke panel? Even Dominique's on the turn.
Sorry, if it was me, I would have done the same thing. I would have said like something similar.
Help.
I would have been a bit meaner actually if I was Tilly.
Someone call Rod Little now and just put him on telly. Brilliant stuff. Well, look, my panel will return. I'm in a world of trouble now because we've got lots more to come. Has Joe Biden lost the plot? We'll find out from a top Washington insider. After the news headlines, here's Polly.
Mark, thank you. Your latest GB News headlines this hour. The last 7 countries remaining on the UK's red list will be removed from next Monday. That means Peru, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Colombia, Haiti, Panama and Venezuela will all no longer face the toughest travel restrictions. That includes hotel quarantines. However, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says the red list category won't be scrapped completely and will remain in place as a precautionary measure. Meanwhile, coronavirus restrictions in Wales are going to be strengthened in a bid to curb new infection levels, which are currently at the highest in the UK. At the next review, the First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, will reintroduce some measures, including guidance around self-isolation. Adults and young people aged 5 to 17 will soon be asked to isolate until they receive a negative PCR test if someone in their household has symptoms or has tested positive. The mother of 2 sisters who were killed by a teenager has vowed to stop him ever being released from prison. 19-year-old Daniel Hussein fatally stabbed Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman last June after he said he'd made a pact with the devil. He's been sentenced to life with a minimum term to serve of 35 years. Well, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick apologised to the family after an independent report found the force's initial response when the girls went missing had been below the standard it should have been. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has summoned the French ambassador after France threatened to impose sanctions on British fishing vessels after a trawler was detained. French authorities say 2 British ships were fined during checks off the coast of Le Havre. It's the latest escalation in the dispute between Britain and France over fishing rights. Well, the Environment Secretary, George Eustace, says threats to block and tighten checks on British boats from French ports could be in breach of international law. A 36-year-old man who sent a malicious email to the Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner has been spared jail. Benjamin Iliffe was sentenced to 15 weeks in prison and suspended for 18 months and handed a restraining order to boot. During his sentencing, the court was told that Iliffe had felt angry after Rayner's use of the term Tory scum at the Labour Party conference. Following the verdict, Miss Rayner posted on Facebook saying she'll continue to speak her mind, but will be more careful about the language she uses. And referrals made by schools to social services regarding vulnerable children fell 31% during the pandemic. According to the Department for Education, just under 36,000 referrals were made up to March the 31st of this year. It reflects restrictions placed on school attendance, which saw the majority of students being homeschooled. That brings you right up to date. Now back to Tonight Live.
Well, I've got an email here on Gordon Ramsay and his daughter Tilly. Those workers humiliated by Gordon Ramsay on those clips didn't choose to be on there. Their bosses agreed the deal. This from Thick Geordie Mick. Thick, you're not Mick at all. You're not Mick or Thick. You're a very bright and clever man. Thank you for your message. Rachel has said, come on, lads, give old Steve Allen a break on LBC. I listen to him occasionally. He's bad at times, but I really think he's just insecure and is really childish at heart and would not really deep down want to upset anyone. Kindness, guys. Well, I will maintain that it's what he does. It's his act. He's bitchy about people. That's his sense of humour. And he described Tilly Ramsay as a chubby little thing. Now, that's not language I would use. And I wouldn't like to describe a woman or anyone in that way. But he followed it up with, she must be a fan of her father's food. The logic there is that he'd basically worked out that punchline, and describing her as chubby was the way into it. It was a joke. Not a great joke, but a joke just the same. However, it's all about opinions, isn't it? It's now just gone 11 o'clock. Uncancelled in a moment. But at this time every night, we take a look at tomorrow's front pages. And let's start with the Metro. Kick in the scallops. France sees UK ship as Macron reignites Brexit fishing battle. The I newspaper, return of the squeezed middle. Low and middle income households face real pain as a result of the budget. The Daily Express, e-cigarettes on NHS to save lives. Apparently they're very successful. Worked for my brilliant colleague Rebecca Reid. Have you tried them? Mark at gbnews.uk. How did you kick the fags if you have done? Mortgage pain as lenders raise rates, say the Express. And COVID slices £1 million off TV Graham Norton's earnings. I like Graham Norton. Daily Telegraph. Johnson summons French ambassador over fish row. Mortgage rates rise just hours after budget. And I won't tell you to eat less meat, says Sunak. Hooray, common sense prevails at number 11. The Sun. To Ron. Classic headline from the Sun newspaper. Ronaldo's girlfriend is expecting twins. United ace will be a dad of 6. Independence. Deluge drives hundreds from homes. Houses in Scotland were evacuated yesterday as heavy rain also caused travel chaos in parts of Cumbria. Youth face turning into Sunak's lost generation. Children and young people face becoming a lost generation with rising educational inequality, high taxes, stagnant pay packets and climbing house prices. Perhaps we shouldn't have shut the economy for a year and a half and closed the schools. Daily Mail. E-cigarettes on prescription. Javid backs controversial plan to help smokers quit. And Le Showdown. Liz Truss, Foreign Secretary. Her fury at French threats after a British boat is seized. And Richard Littlejohn, their columnist in the Mail, has written, Rishi spent like a drunken sailor, but he's picked the pockets of Middle England. The Times, French ambassador hauled in over seizure of British trawler. Mortgage and tax bills to increase after budgets. Millions more will pay higher rates, say analysts. And professor in transphobia furore quits university. An academic who was subject to bullying and harassment by students because of her views on transgender rights has resigned. That's a really sorry end to what has been a sorry tale. The e-cigarette story is in The Guardian as well. And more on Kathleen Stock, the philosophy professor at the centre of row over her views on gender identification, has announced her resignation from the University of Sussex. She has said she believes gender ideology does not outweigh biological sex when it comes to law and policy, and that people cannot change their biological sex. My Beautiful Girls, mother vows to stop ever The killer being freed, of course, that tragic story that we covered earlier. 2 young women murdered by somebody that had made an imaginary pact with the devil in what is a truly shocking crime story. And definitely the police dropped the ball in their investigation. The Daily Mirror. Perfect storm. Up mortgages. Up inflation. Up tax increases. Millions are facing a real pain crisis after Sunak's failure to level up. And finally, Star. Kicked in the scallops. Fury at Les Pirates. That's right. More on that ensuing escalating row with the French. OK, folks, it's time for this. It's time now for Uncancelled, in which we tackle the dark underbelly of the news agenda. And tonight we're heading to the United States for Uncancel USA. President Joe Biden and the Democrats have vowed to make billionaires cry with a massive new tax on the super rich.
I don't want to punish anyone's success. I'm a capitalist. I want everyone to be able to, if they want to be a millionaire or billionaire, to be able to seek their goal. But all I'm asking is pay your fair share. Pay your fair share. Pay your fair share. And right now, many of them are paying virtually nothing.
Unsurprisingly, there's been backlash from the Republicans. Here's what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell had to say about the plans on Monday.
Far left is officially calling the shots. And that's where the latest new craziness comes into the picture. If public reporting has it right, the Democrats are so desperate to raise taxes that they're now proposing to tax money the American people haven't even made yet. This harebrained scheme would have the IRS penalizing people who've invested wisely and compensating people who have invested poorly, all independent of whether they have actually made or lost any money.
Let's speak now to top Washington insider Errol Moorcock. Hi, Errol.
Hi, how are you doing, Mark?
Very well. Taxes on the rich, so much for aspiration.
Right, yeah, the American dream is, perhaps a dream for you, your neighbor, and all of the cul-de-sac. On one hand, I have to admit that it's not a bad political strategy to say, we're only going to target, people with $1 billion, with $100 million a year. That's only 700 households. But this is the U.S. government. This is just how they get the foot in the door and set precedent. Quite frankly, the concept of taxing unrealized gains, I'll say this tongue-in-cheek, but it's a very real precedent. What's the difference between me buying a Powerball ticket for the lottery on Wednesday and from now until Wednesday, do I not have unrealized capital gains? Moreover, every time the capital gains tax has been lowered in this country, the actual revenue has been actually increased. When Donald Trump lowered the capital gains tax, which is the umbrella that this tax would fall under, the IRS actually, on just payroll taxes, on just investment in income, collected about $93 billion more. So you have a situation where, it's the blind leading the blind. People like Elon Musk are treasures. They are the great immigrants who come to this country, and they come to this country because there's a fair system. Now, asking them to pay their fair share, that's actually a real argument. Just because that there's loopholes and whatnot, the fact that some of these corporations are paying 0% effective tax, and my company down here in Florida can't, access that level of perhaps accounting trickery and whatnot is one thing, but closing loopholes that allow people to exploit existing wealth is much different than taxing unrealized wealth. This started in the office of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders 5-10 years ago, and it seeped through my alma mater at UC Berkeley all the way to being the talking point. And so when they say words like "make billionaires cry," what they're really saying is these guys are in the way, and as soon as they're out of the way, we're coming for you, which is what Donald Trump told us about the politics. They're not going after Elon Musk. They're coming after the middle earners, which is why Joe Biden has allocated some $87 billion for new IRS federal agents to go after people making $600 transactions. Because apparently the people who make $600 transactions are the billionaires who he's going to make cry. So he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. And honestly, as a marionette, I'm not surprised because somebody's pulling the strings, and I don't think they have any economic background. This is going to end terribly for American exceptionalism, American outside foreign investment. And quite frankly, the thing the Democrat Party doesn't seem to realize is that our top earners, our top performers can get on their planes and leave. It's not the billionaires you can keep here. And if you try to put an exit tax on people, that means you've created a prison. That's what they do in communist countries, not in America, not the America that I know. So that's Joe Biden's situation right now. He's not going to have the support of the American people, whether or not he thinks he can, play the cheap card of, oh, we're only going after the billionaires. Everybody knows that that's just a Trojan horse for the rest of us.
Senator Elizabeth Warren, who campaigned for the presidency on a wealth tax protocol, has re-emerged to push for the bill, name-checking Jeff Bezos in a series of interviews. Take a look.
The American people get it. They get that the system is rigged. Teachers and nurses and firefighters are just tired of paying more in taxes than Jeff Bezos pays. This is one of those moments of reckoning. And the folks who have to be brought along are the folks sitting in Washington, the elected officials. And that's what I think we've got our toes right on the line to get done.
Let's defend Queen Elizabeth. Here's the point, Errol. America's broke. It needs the money.
America is broke. America does need the money, and America would be well advised to not find it through federal programs. I think what they're trying to do is have their cake and eat it too with inflation. If you wanted to all of a sudden take the U.S. dollar, which has not yet crumbled, I mean, for goodness sakes, perhaps they have a point. If they're about to inflate the currency into hyperinflation, you might as well get something out of it beforehand. But they quite simply, they are missing the obvious fact that when you run out of other people's money, there's nowhere else to go. If you were to tax all the millionaires in this country 100%, you could pay for the government for 4 months. All the billionaires, generously, you could probably pay for the government for 12 months. And that's sort of the entire problem that we're running into, because they refuse to acknowledge that this is something that the American people are not going to stand for. And I think that the sort of double entendres, like these spending plans aren't going to cost anything, it's actually going to be a net positive to your country, the American taxpayer isn't buying. And so that's why Joe Biden is in there, repeating 5-6 times to the camera, because it's not resonating. And I don't think that strategy has produced the results that they're hoping, because at the same time they did this, they took away a lot of the social programs, like the free college tuition that they had promised everybody, and all of these things at the same time. So on one hand, they're promising we need to raise this money from all the billionaires to give you the free health care and the free this and that. And then they come back and say, oh, by the way, you're not getting any of that, and we're shipping your job to Sri Lanka. So it doesn't fit. It's almost to the point of beyond parity. It's dysfunction, and that's concerning, I think, for everybody.
Let's bring my panel in, Errol, if I may. Author and journalist Rebecca Reed, broadcaster and comedian Andrew Doyle, and political commentator Dominique Samuels. Dominique, what's your view about this? Because the bottom line is, whilst billionaires pay a lot of tax, they probably don't pay the same proportion as the rest of us.
I think that's a real problem, but I think, like Errol says, I think you should really focus on the loopholes that these billionaires exploit.
Well, good luck with that, Dominique.
Yeah, but because at the end of the day, if you raise taxes in that way, what they can simply do is move their wealth elsewhere. And then what you're stuck with is middle earners bearing the brunt of this. And what governments tend to do is they tend to say, oh, we're going to tax the rich. And then years later, you realise that what's actually happening is middle income earners are actually ending up paying more and not actually being told very honestly about it. So I think it's just a classic thing that you see all the time when governments say they want to tax rich people and they end up just taxing middle earners.
Andrew Doyle, you've got a few quid. What do you think?
I certainly don't. I mean, if you're suggesting that I'm in that bracket, you're way off the mark.
What? Never say never, Andrew.
But let's play that.
Dare to dream.
Let's play that. Oh, I do. Let's play that imaginary game, though. I mean, if I were a billionaire, how would I feel about this? And I would expect to be taxed proportionately according to my wealth. It wouldn't bother me if I was that rich. I would expect to pay proportionately more tax. And so maybe we should be appealing to the super rich. And appealing to their conscience Because I just think that's an ethical thing. I mean, it's all very well saying, you know, it's good to have an aspirational society where it is possible to become a rich individual. But the sheer extent of the disparity between the super rich and the poor is surely too egregious for any sort of civilized society.
Errol?
I would like to point out that a lot of this is paper wealth. It's not as though Jeff Bezos, who owns about 15% of Amazon, or Elon Musk, who owns 30% of Amazon, it's not that they have this billions of dollars in their account. So they would have to liquidate their company, which would then cause the valuation to plummet at the same time, reducing their net worth to liquidate the funds to pay the tax. And so I agree with you completely. Number one, there are loopholes that need to be changed. It's not fair for proportional these people to consider everything as investment income. There's a lot of people, and actually the ones who are high-frequency hedge fund traders, they're the biggest violators of this. And I do think that disparity is on paper great, but it's a paper disparity where you have working class people who have actual real net worths and billionaires who have net worths that are almost traded on multiples of valuation. And so there's also the fact that these are companies that have created a lot of wealth and jobs in their community. When Amazon was chased out of New York City by AOC, my state I grew up in, my home state of Virginia, was more than happy to welcome them because that was going to be hundreds of thousands of six-figure jobs paying property taxes and paying income taxes. So there's a larger value in job creation stuff that these people get that they offset with taxes. For example, if Elon Musk doesn't take any profit this year, it's tough to say that he made money even though his valuation goes up. So that's where the idea of these unrealized profits taxes come in. And I think it is incumbent upon this billionaire class who has this disproportionate wealth to, we have Warren Buffett with the Giving Pledge and some stuff like that. But if there was a more concentrated and obvious consortium of good coming out of the billionaire class, perhaps on their own goodwill, they could give back a lot. And I think that, despite the fact that we don't give them a lot of credit, but they certainly don't seem to be a bunch of evil people, at least perhaps.
Rebecca, do you think billionaires... Thanks, Errol. Do you think, Rebecca, that billionaires are demonised? Ultimately, they are wealth creators, aren't they?
I don't give a whatever word I can't say if billionaires are demonised. Firstly, Jeff Bezos is worth 196.1 billion. I think the idea that he hasn't got a bill in his bank account, not true. Secondly, I think there is this bizarre mentality that some people have that we need to protect the billionaires. And I think it comes from this feeling deep down inside ourselves that none of us are poor or low earners or mid earners. We're all just like potentially billionaires. And when I make my billion, I don't want to have to pay that tax. No one here is going to be a billionaire. None of us. Nobody watching is going to be a billionaire. There are like 600 billionaires in the US. It's not going to be you. It's not going to be me. And the idea that you're expending your energy protecting them is bonkers. And they're not, and also I think the idea that billionaires are such brats that when they're asked to pay the same proportional amount of tax as you or I, they're going to go, well, I'm leaving this country then. I'm going to go and live in Sarajevo. People like living in the US because it's a nice country and they like living there, running their businesses there.
I get what you mean. I think my issue really is in terms of the corporate power that billionaires do have because of the fact that, they do own so many different companies and it's essentially controlled by the same source. Take Mark Zuckerberg, for example. I think my issue really would be sort of trying to break up massive corporations that own several different companies, which actually stifles market competition and actually puts smaller businesses and other smaller franchises at a disadvantage. I think that's my issue.
I'm going to say I don't think anybody needs to be a billionaire. I think it's too much money for any one person to have.
Errol, briefly.
Well, I would say that I disagree in the sense that I do think that the capacity for extreme achievement should be there. But I also agree with you that something has to be done in the sense that the disparity is too great. And perhaps what Dominique suggested is more of the line that we can look at, breaking up big tech. Corporatism is not the same thing as capitalism. And our economy has slipped away from a free market, free competition into perhaps more of a closed market oligarchy than both the left and right would like to admit. So there definitely is room for improvement, but I would say I do believe the billionaire has a chance to exist, and the majority of multimillionaires are self-made, at least in the United States. So there's something to be said for that. I understand both sides of the argument.
Well, there you are. Listen, Errol, great to have you on the show. Please come and join us again soon. There you go. Errol Morkoch, who is a top Washington insider, a political strategist of some renown. Interesting thoughts and a brilliant question posed by Rebecca Reed. I told you she was double boom because that is a question. Should there be billionaires? Is the existence of billionaires a symptom of a broken economy and a divided society? What do you think? What's your view on billionaires? mark@gbnews.uk. Also, should we put trigger warnings on books dealing with historical content? We'll be looking at this and more in Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next in a media buzz was the John Lewis advert featuring a boy in a dress trashing his parents' home. The worst ad of all time. I'm delighted to say that the team have put together some absolute howlers. You won't want to miss it. See you after the weather.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast. There is further rain for many during the next 24 hours, particularly those areas of northern and western England, southern Scotland as well as Wales, where we are currently seeing heavy rainfall. And this weather front has stalled during the last couple of days across northern England, southern Scotland. It's finally making some progress south and east, but the focus for heavy rain continues to be Cumbria. Amber warning in force for the rest of the day, and then increasingly Wales and the southwest. Spells of rain overnight amounting to 40 millimetres widely, 80 millimetres over higher ground, perhaps even more for Snowdonia. Risk of disruption, risk of localised flooding. Drier for East Anglia in the southeast, mild here. Colder for Northern Ireland, western Scotland as well, with some clear spells overnight. Otherwise, a lot of cloud as we start off the day on Friday. Further spells of wet weather pushing through Wales, moving up into northern England, southern and then eventually central Scotland. The rain across England and Wales turning to showers by the afternoon as they finally arrive into the east of England, staying mild in many places, but brighter skies start to emerge in Northern Ireland, South Wales and southwest England, albeit with a few showers, and colder air is pushing in here. We say goodbye to the rain, finally, from northeast Scotland overnight, but the next batch of showers or rain moves through by the early hours, pushing into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest during Friday evening, and then into parts of Scotland, central England, by dawn on Saturday. With all of that weather going on, it's going to be a mild start to the weekend, but not as mild as it has been, and it's a bright enough start in East Anglia and the southeast, but the rain is moving through here quite quickly, and it also clears through parts of Scotland by the afternoon. It's replaced by sunny spells and blustery showers across all parts on Saturday. Sunday sees more widespread wind and rain, and it turns colder.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Brilliant to have your company, and we've pushed the boat out for the last 30 minutes of the show. We've got our media buzz, tomorrow's front pages, and my panel, of course, Rebecca Reed, Andrew Doyle, and Dominique Samuels. Let's talk about John Lewis, a marvellous department store, I think you'll agree. They claim they are never knowingly undersold, but they got in trouble for overselling the benefits of their home insurance in one of the most hated ads in recent memory. The high-end brand have axed the promo after the Financial Conduct Authority deemed it potentially misleading and could cause customers to be confused about what was on offer. In a statement, the company insisted this was absolutely never our intention and said they'd hoped the clip would be a joyful watch. No such luck upon its release earlier this month. Conservatives accused the ad of pushing a woke agenda with a cross-dressing lead character, whilst parents complained it would encourage kids to trash their houses. And feminists hit out at the stereotypical roles assigned to the boy's mother and sister. It's hard to imagine how this could have gone any worse, which leads me to ask, is it one of the worst, most disastrous ad campaigns ever? Rebecca, you are a feminist, an official feminist.
Big feminist. My core belief.
Did you? Well, that's brilliant, and I share your views. Do you think that this was an insult to women, this ad?
I just think, honestly, everyone hated it. No one liked it. Woke people didn't like it. Conservative people didn't like it. People who like specifics of home insurance didn't like it. It was a bad advert. And I think, honestly, it's extraordinary that nobody in the process said, guys, would we actually cover any of this damage that we're portraying?
Yeah.
Or if they did, they were like, shut up, Sandra.
There was apparently a bit of an emergency meeting when Elton John did the John Lewis ad a couple of years ago, and someone pointed out that they don't sell pianos.
I remember that. But so clearly, I mean, I once was not hired by the company that does. I was trying to get into advertising as a teenager, and I was not given a job by the people who do John Lewis's adverts. And perhaps I was just too good for them.
Correct.
Because I think about things.
Yeah.
Basically, it was just I don't know whether you have the Peloton advert, but I think this is the natural successor as the worst advert of all time.
Well, I'll ask the team to have a look about if they can find the Peloton advert. But by the way, I believe John Lewis sell small Casio keyboards and that kind of thing, so you can technically purchase a keyboard from John Lewis. And why wouldn't you? But, Dominique, isn't this a company wading into the kind of choppy waters of politics where they don't belong?
It was virtue signalling. They were trying to make a statement. In my view, it was, hey, look at me, I'm a boy in a dress, and, you know, my mum and my sister are watching in the sidelines. I can wear your dress and be better than you because I'm a boy. I don't think that was the intention, but it's how it came across. And, you know, it's that line, go woke, go broke, and that's essentially what happened.
Well, go woke, his behaviour
Rebecca?
be covered. I think going woke can be fine, but I think you have to do it elegantly, and I didn't mind the Gillette advert, but it's a very good example of go woke, go broke.
And that was
men were very
toxic
upset.
Masculinity.
Yes, Gillette said that sometimes not all men are perfect, and men just crap themselves.
That's not quite what they say.
I've been a little bit flippant, but they addressed issues that did exist, and people were like, well, I'm not going to buy your razor if you don't like me, which was their choice, and it did.
Would you like corporations to stay in their lane? I mean, do we need to know what Ben & Jerry's think about Britain's immigration policy?
Ben & Jerry's have some quite problematic views tending towards what I would deem anti-Semitism. So I would say that their issue, I think their treatment of Israel is pretty grim. And I think the problem is I shouldn't know what my ice cream company my ice cream provider thinks about Judaism.
Andrew, I've got no doubt you've covered this topic at length on Free Speech Nation.
We've talked a lot about the Ben & Jerry's thing, and it's like, you know, this is an ice cream company. You know, you go out to buy your truffle kerfuffle or whatever. They don't want to know what...
Cherry Garcia.
Oh, Cherry Garcia, OK. Or fish food or whatever. And you don't want to know what they think about defunding the police. Or, I mean, it's got absolutely nothing to do with it. You know, when I go and buy a Mr. Whippy from the van, I don't want a lecture about global capitalism or you know.
But for some brands,
I don't care.
For some brands, it is part of so Lush is a very socially conscious brand, and it's always been vegan, ethical, not tested on animals. It's always been quite like a hippie soap shop.
Yeah.
So the fact
I love
that
walking
they are,
past it.
I really don't enjoy the smell. I really don't like it.
In fact, I loiter outside.
I don't know whether an ice cream company can have the moral high ground. You know, you sell junk food that makes kids fat, and then they die. So I don't think you can do that.
No, but I think there are some brands where it's in keeping with their branding to be.
I think that's a fair point.
Political.
Like the Body Shop.
Yeah, exactly. The Body Shop have always had, though, then they sold to somebody who did test on. This is the problem: is that if you say I'm a woke right on shop, you've got to try and get it right consistently. If you just stay very quiet, then if you test on a couple of bunny rabbits, then no one cares.
Yeah, that's the thing with moral grandstanding, though, especially if you're a massive corporation. There will always be areas where people can catch you out, and that's why it's best just to keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, do you think that actually it could come full circle and that companies will start saying no politics here, just buy our product? I mean, I think that would be a great advertising slogan, wouldn't it?
I mean, it probably...
You know, here's a washing powder, no politics, just buy it. It makes clothes clean.
Yeah, but I don't think in today's culture that'll necessarily suffice, because in today's culture, politics is literally woven into every single thing we see, every single thing we do, every single conversation. You literally just can't escape it. But
also, as a woke person, I would start to assume that they had some very bad opinions if they were advertising they don't have opinions.
Isn't there a problem as well, though, that if you work for one of these companies and they're making these grand political statements, there is a pressure on employees to conform to that idea, which they probably don't. I mean, when Ben & Jerry's... I mean, we're talking political here, not just social issues. When Ben & Jerry's specifically have a go at Priti Patel because of her policies, well, they're coming down very clearly on one side of the political divide, and not all of their employees will feel the same way. I think it is a real problem. We've been quite flippant and silly about it, but actually, it is quite a problem. I don't think it should happen.
I think there's a wider problem about that, in that very often you'll have a mental health awareness week at work where people feel pushed to disclose the status of their mental illness, or they'll say everyone has to put their pronouns at the bottom of their email, which is in theory a good idea, but actually means people are pushed to make a commitment and may end up having to either disclose something they're not comfortable with or like misgender themselves. Like, this stuff doesn't really help.
I don't think you're woke.
Well, don't say that. I don't have a job if I'm not woke.
I think you're left-leaning, but I think that you believe that the individual should decide.
I'm like a woke libertarian, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I quite like that. Woke libertarian.
Yeah, that's me.
New party.
Bring back the smoking ban, but also women are always right.
Yeah, I think we can all agree.
No, but get rid of the smoking ban, but women are always right.
There you go. Well, I can tell you that there are plenty of examples of adverts that have gone down like a lead balloon. Take a look at this. Reality star and socialite Kendall Jenner almost destroyed her career with a Pepsi ad that saw her solve racism by offering a police officer with a can of cola at a BLM protest.
Why did
there you go.
Oh, she fixed racism, Dominique.
I fixed it
Leave
for
her alone.
you.
Why did they make her do that?
Racism's over now.
You're welcome.
We owe her a lot.
What a great human being.
She's the Martin Luther King of 2020.
The 2017 commercial was pulled within 24 hours. Amid complaints, it trivialised the movement and portrayed Kendall as a white saviour. Dominique?
I feel so sorry for her, because I actually watched Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Me
and
too.
They did a bit on this actual advert, and she was crying her eyes out like, I just didn't know that this would be the reaction. I don't know how you didn't know that.
What was Chris thinking? Kris Jenner is one of the smartest women on this planet.
That's true.
What was she thinking?
It's clearly not her
I don't think she likes it.
It's not her fault. It wasn't her intention. However,
it's a bit her fault.
The thing with the virtue signalling and the trying to put politics into every single little thing, you will inevitably slip up. And she probably thought she was doing a really great thing, but she just ended up embarrassed.
Also, you would have sold way more if she just worn a bikini, opened it and spilled it on herself. People would have liked that.
Yeah. It's not very feminist.
It's very feminist. It's her body, her choice, and she would have been well paid for it. You got great boobs, make money with them.
I might try that tomorrow night.
Yes, you do.
Little boost to ratings. Now to another recent controversy. Last December, and you mentioned it, Rebecca, fitness brand Peloton saw its market value plunge by £1 billion over an advert depicting a man buying his partner a spin bike for Christmas. The clip was called sexist, out of touch, and even dystopian for implying the man was trying to make her lose weight. Ouch! Here's a reminder.
You ready?
Yes.
Now.
A Peloton? Give it up for our first time ride.
All right, first ride. I'm a little nervous, but excited. A year ago, I didn't realize how much this would change me. Thank you.
Oh, that's
She just looks. Honestly, if you watch the whole thing, she looks so frightened and like she's been kidnapped the whole way through. There's fear in her eyes.
I don't think it's that offensive.
No, I didn't.
It wasn't offensive. It was really funny. Like it was hilarious. It was their marriage was extraordinary. Also, did encourage people like as a man, if your wife hasn't asked for it, don't buy her an exercise bike as a
She
surprise.
might always go out jogging, like.
Yeah, we don't know the backstory of this couple, do we?
Unless she's asked for it, just don't buy it.
To be fair, I remember a friend of mine did buy his girlfriend a step because he said she was getting too big, and that is offensive.
What?
Yeah, I mean that is offensive,
that went
right?
down not well.
Well, yeah, it didn't go down well.
Don't buy.
No.
Christmas is coming up. Don't buy unless asked a Hoover or exercise equipment or any kind of itchy red lingerie. Unless asked, don't buy.
But it's possible that the woman in that advert, because we don't know the backstory, maybe she had begged, maybe said, I really want this.
Well, she was very surprised by it, so that suggested to me that she hadn't. But there was also a great follow-up advert from Ryan Reynolds' gin company, where she's taken out with two friends and they give her a martini and she's like, I'm free, I'm finally free. It was hilarious.
Do you think maybe Steve Allen might gift Tilly Ramsey a Peloton just to say sorry?
I don't think Steve Allen could afford a Peloton. They're very expensive.
You really hate Steve Allen.
Really Allen.
I don't know much about anything about him really, other than what we've
He
discussed.
does the early breakfast show on LBC.
Does he?
But he's been at LBC since the 80s, so he's been
So he's not- but
on
he's
the radio for
he's not a
decades.
comedian, is he? He's just a cat.
He's a funny broadcaster.
Yeah, yeah.
Where do you stand, by the way, as funny people on the telly who are not comedians?
What's wrong with that?
As a comedian, do you see them as a different species?
No. Should they be banned?
I think some comedians
This
do.
is very strange, and we get these debates whenever someone makes a joke and they're not a comedian, and they get it in the neck. Much more than comedians. Comedians get a free pass. But humour is something that is part of humanity generally.
But don't you think comics are a bit snooty about people like Jonathan Ross going, well, he's not a stand-up?
Yes, they are. They're terrible.
Yeah.
But comedians are the worst people in the world.
Really good point. Apart from you and me.
Apart from me. But the others are just narcissists.
I don't think comedians are that funny. They don't make me laugh.
Boom. Well said.
Mic drop.
Definitely the mic drop moment. And finally, let's throw back to another very complained about advert. In fact, the most complained about advert in UK TV history. Do you remember this? Absolutely disgusting.
I don't understand it, but I don't know what's wrong with it.
I think people found it was just a bit disgusting to watch.
What year?
Dominique.
Do you know what
Gross.
year it was?
Gross.
Do you know when that was?
It was a few years ago. I think we mentioned the 2005, quite a
So
long time
when
ago.
people say that we've all got all woke and offended recently, clearly we haven't. If we were offended by that 15 years ago. Also,
Yeah.
how was that 15
I do
years
find
ago?
myself watching things from then, though, and thinking that would never, ever run today. I
Yeah.
know it's a bit longer ago, but Mean Girls, like some of the jokes you see in that film.
Oh no, Mean Girls is a massive, massive hit with teenagers now. Gen Z love Mean
Really?
Girls.
Because I was watching it back, and some of the jokes, like the African jokes, because she's
The
a
thing
white girl
they-
from Africa, I thought people would probably be crying
The
about
thing Gen Z get cross about is that she's referred to as being from Africa rather than an African country.
Exactly.
Which, to be fair,
That's
it is
the joke
weird.
that she's white and she's
I should
from
say I've
Africa.
never seen Mean
Africa,
Girls.
why are you white?
I've got no idea what. No, I've never seen it. I've got no interest in it. I've no idea what you're talking
Guys, Andrew Dolan needs
This
to
is
watch it.
This is just gibberish as far as
You
I'm
need to watch. It's genuinely one of the best pieces of
Is
writing.
it about girls being mean to
It's
each other?
teenage girls at
Yeah.
school being mean to each other.
Sounds
about
terribly
kids.
misogynistic
It's like anthropology. No,
it's good. It's so
also it's
funny.
much less sexist to acknowledge that girls aren't always sweet and kind, and they are actually incredibly aggressive, just like boys are.
But the title Mean Girls implies that girls are inherently mean. And
I think girls are inherently mean. I think boys are too. I think teenagers are inherently mean.
Maybe humans are. I've just got a lovely email from Danny, and Danny said, "Hi Mark, I've only just got home from work. Love the show, but what's with the Colonel Sanders look?"
Oh yeah, that was a bit rude.
No, I think it's a statement of fact, isn't it? All I'm missing is the goatee.
Is it moustache? Is it
I
moustache
think
as
you could
well?
pull off a goatee. I think you could pull off.
I'm ready.
Well, for when we've had our next lockdown, you can get a beard.
No, I don't like.
Brilliant stuff. Well, look, really well done to Daniel and the team for putting together that compilation of adverts. That particular KFC advert attracted 1,500 complaints to the Advertising Standards Agency over fears it could encourage bad manners in children.
Oh, lighten up.
And there you go. I do have one thing to say about that, really briefly, which is that my son, when he was eating dinner one evening, and luckily I was home, he got a bit of broccoli stuck in his windpipe, and it was very scary for a minute or two because he couldn't breathe, and I had to thump it out of his back. And I feel blessed every time I remember that, he was okay in the end. Eating like that, stuffing your mouth full of food, and that's maybe a choking hazard.
That is potentially dangerous. Yes.
I don't want to be, you know me, I'm not censorious about these things, but I wouldn't recommend shoving that much food in your mouth at any one time.
No, but I don't think a KFC ad is going to change the way a child eats. I think parents are responsible and teach them how to eat. Then
If the KFC advert is doing the parenting, then perhaps the problem is not totally the KFC advert.
Well said. Lovely. Slam dunk. We've had a boom. We've had a mic drop. Slam dunk. Andrew, you're next.
No, I can't possibly compete. It's too much pressure.
No pressure, but you do have to say something amazing now.
Amazingly witty and intelligent.
Well, how about this? I think you're going to love this one, Andrew. Have we reached peak selfie? Influencer Jane Rivera faced a backlash after she posed for glamorous photos, no problem, in front of her late father's open casket. The 20-year-old captioned the images, "Butterfly, fly away, R.I.P. Pappy, you are my best friend, a life well lived." And of course, the sentiment is lovely, and I really, really extend my condolences to this young woman and her family. But I don't think that's the look I would go for at the funeral, Andrew.
It's not. I don't know her, and I know nothing about her, and I don't know how she is going through the grieving process, and I don't know why she's doing that. I probably don't fully understand the context.
Well, I'll give you some, actually, the good news. Responding to the backlash, a Floridian Jane said, "Everyone handles the loss of a loved one in different ways. Some are more traditional, while others might come across as taboo. For me, I treated the celebration as if my father was right next to me, posing for the camera as he had done on many occasions."
I'm actually changing my mind as I'm watching this. It's a voice. No, because actually, sometimes when people pass on, you want to make the funeral a fun event. And I had a relative who died who in his will said that everyone should come along in bright colours and not if you come from the Irish tradition, the wake is the most fun, raucous, silly. And it's a way to celebrate the life. So maybe that's what she's doing there, rather than saying, "Look how hot I am."
No.
Am I wrong, Dominic?
That's such rubbish.
Oh, well, look, I'm just trying to...
I mean, that's a lovely way to view it, but she's just an example of the peak narcissism of our generation. Who feels the need to pose like that in front of your dead dad's casket? Who is in the mood to pose like that?
Well, basically, it's her poor father has died, and yet it's all about her.
It's all about her, and you pose.
Well, it's not going to do him any good to be about him, is it?
Yeah, John
He's not got much use for.
Well, it's his big day, though, isn't it?
I mean, no, his big day's his wedding day. This is somebody else's big day. You've had your moment.
Really?
No, but it's a funeral. Who poses
Tough love
like
there
that?
from Reece.
I think honestly,
Remind me not to do the eulogy at your funeral.
I'm
Or
dead.
vice versa.
I'm not going to know anything about it, am I?
No,
You do what you like.
I don't want people having a good time at my funeral. I want people wailing and tearing their hair, wearing mantillas.
Yeah.
I want the big drama. I want the drama.
I promise.
Okay.
I will.
Well, I'm definitely going first.
Take pictures like that outside of your casket.
I think people grieve in different ways.
But I think, isn't that the moment at the height of grief, a bit of a booty call?
What?
Showing your bum.
That's not what a booty call means,
Because
Mark.
What is a booty call?
A booty call's when you phone someone for sex.
Yeah, I was thinking, what?
But she may...
You're so innocent and naive. That's really sweet.
No, I thought that was showing your bum. You know what I've just done? I've just had a David Cameron moment. David Cameron thought lol meant lots of love. Remember that?
Yes.
I've just done it.
But I mean, it is a sexually suggestive pose. People do that to make their bums look bigger.
Yeah. And she looks great.
It's inappropriate. She clearly did it.
But
for
she
clicks
does look
online.
great. I think we have to credit that.
I think John Legend and Chrissy Teigen did something similar, which I found very weird. When she had a miscarriage, they would taking selfies of themselves crying and then posted it on Instagram.
I really fundamentally disagree on that point. I think the way that they grieved as somebody who has lost a baby, the way that they grieved was so powerful because it's such an area of taboo where you're so pressured not to talk about it, and it meant so much to me and to other people in the miscarriage community to see somebody being so honest.
I mean,
there is a miscarriage community.
I mean, I don't.
There is absolutely a miscarriage.
Okay, that's fair enough, but
it is fair enough. Yes.
What do you mean?
I really hope that you never experience it, but trust me.
No, I think you're getting a bit offended. There's one.
I am, because I'm talking about the loss of my baby.
Okay, well, Dominic.
That's not what this is about. There's
Say what your point is.
Rebecca, chill out. There's one thing speaking about a miscarriage and letting people know about it, and there's another thing taking a picture, having someone take a picture of you and your husband crying, and then editing the photo in black
So
and
I think
white.
the context...
They had a photographer in the room when they gave birth, when she gave birth to her son.
I think the context, and I'm very glad you pointed out about miscarriage, which is an epidemic in society. It's terribly common.
1 in 4
It's a tragedy.
pregnancies.
There you go. I mean, that's a shocking statistic. But I think what Dominique was saying is that it's the principle of sharing grief through a photograph.
Yeah, so they had... So lots of people choose to have a photographer in the room when they give birth with a live baby. And they would have done, and they did that with their previous children. And so when Chrissy had to give birth to her son, who was called Jack, she chose to still have that birth photographer there because to her, that's how she gives birth to her children.
Okay.
And she felt that it's really important that people feel able to share the only photographs they'll ever take with their child.
And they wanted to celebrate the baby.
Yeah, and you can see a picture of her holding the baby.
I just don't agree with it.
I think, Dominique, that's quite a touching thing to do, isn't it?
No, I don't. If you've seen the picture, it's a really, really odd picture. She's literally posing, crying with John Legend, and posted it and edited it and put it on Instagram, like, right after it happened. It's a similar thing with this, and a similar thing with people just feeling the need to take really superficial photographs.
There is nothing superficial about wanting to have the only photographs that will ever be taken. They're not the same thing. This girl with her dad, fine, whatever, it's a silly thing to have done. Having the only photographs that will ever be taken of you and your dead child is not superficial.
Personally, I wouldn't have done that. That's it.
You don't have to, and I very, very, very much hope you'll never find yourself.
It's got nothing to do with
I really hope
that it's about sharing intimate moments with millions of people
So
online.
you can't share a picture with your... So if you have a live baby, you're not allowed to share a picture of that?
That's not the same.
Why is it not the same? Why do you not have a right to share a picture of you if your child has died?
It's the way in which it was done, but you're clearly upset.
There is a desperate lack of empathy coming from you right now. I am genuinely horrified.
OK.
Well, it's a really, really tough conversation to have, and I appreciate both of you for having the conversation. And I completely hear where you're coming from, having been through that absolutely horrific trauma and grief and tragedy. So if you are somebody that's in that situation, or you have been in that situation, there is so much support out there. So do seek an online resource. You can speak to your GP. There are so many free mental health services as well in relation to miscarriage, including the Miscarriage Association. So do reach out if you're struggling. So there you go. Lots more to come. Before the end of the show, does Rebecca Reed have a concrete reason for Mike Graham, good friend of mine, being her union jackass? We'll find out after this.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
So there you are. Look, lots of responses coming in. Many people extending their sympathies to anyone that's had a miscarriage, and it is such a common occurrence, and it's a tragedy for all involved. And it's, I think, something that we should look at again in greater detail on the show. But thanks for all of your responses. Darren has said, I feel for Rebecca completely. I hope she doesn't feel offended by what was said. And Darren, I guess, striking a middle ground, I agree that the photos themselves were strange. Perhaps if they were from a more genuine celebrity, we'd feel different, but it came from someone with previous on this. But I feel for Rebecca and for Chrissy as well. So Darren, there you go, striking a very a sort of balanced comment there. However, Shanu says, Mark, having had 4 consecutive miscarriages, I agree with Dominique. It's private at the time, not an opportunity for sympathy fishing. I happily went on to have a son when I was 42, never gave up. OK, well, look, we'll never achieve a middle ground on that one, will we? But it's a tough topic, and as I said, we will try to return to it soon. So my panel are with us until midnight: Rebecca Reed, Andrew Doyle, and Dominique Samuels. And let's get their Union Jackass and Greatest Britain. Very excited about this one. So, Rebecca, your Greatest Britain.
So I went for the guy who had the ink thrown in his face, who is a Insulate Britain protester, not actually particularly committed to Insulate Britain, but I kind of wanted to pick it because I wanted to make the point that we shouldn't be throwing liquids at people, and we didn't like it when people threw milkshakes, even though I didn't like the people who were being milkshaked.
Yeah.
And I don't like it when we throw ink, and I think it reduces it very poorly. But also it does make a hero out of somebody. He's now the victim rather than the aggressor.
I don't think that these numpties should be physically attacked, because then you lose the argument, you lose the moral high ground.
Yeah, and
well, it is a physical attack. I mean, you can actually do damage if you spray ink in someone's face.
Yeah. What about the bagpipes? I mean, was that a sort of gentle protest? Was that more peaceful?
I mean, I hate bagpipes, so I suppose I know if
that would be worse.
Scottish people, but that's not pleasant either. But no, I mean, noise is a different thing. But I think actual physical interaction of any kind, I just think no.
Yeah, it's a bit of an inevitability.
It is a little bit in it, no, definitely. So, OK, well, briefly, Andrew, just haven't got long to power through these. Your Greatest Britain?
Is Kathleen Stock. We talked about her earlier briefly. So this is the professor at Sussex who has now resigned because she was subject to a campaign of abuse and harassment and threats and all kinds of things from activists who just disagreed with her point of view. And, of course, there's a way to disagree, and she would have been the first to accept peaceful protest or criticism. But instead, they opted for these tactics, and it made her life hell for the past couple of months. I mean, thankfully, the university supported her, and the Vice-Chancellor did, but the union, the Academics Union, said that she probably should be fired, or at least came out on the side of the activists, which is an absolute disgraceful situation. And I just think it's a shame, I understand why she's resigned, because ultimately to work under those conditions with that constant fear of what could happen would be intolerable. But nevertheless, in a sense, I wish it didn't have to come to that. But no, I think... and the other thing to say about Kathleen Stock is her writing is so thoughtful, considerate. It is not needlessly provocative. It is just the expression of an opinion. It does not lack humanity in the way that the activists are pretending. And I'm assuming that actually they haven't read it.
Now she'll have a bigger platform. We are only a few seconds, Dominique. I'm so sorry, but your Greatest Britain?
Mine is Adam Brooks, who's at Essex PR on
Brilliant,
Twitter,
man.
Republican, anti-lockdown
Hospitality.
activist. Yeah, he did a tweet recently about him feeling tired and sort of worn down, and I said to him, basically keep it up, because the data that he publishes and everything, it keeps people sane, it keeps me sane, so I just wanted to do a little tribute there for him.
Union Jackass, couple of seconds.
I just felt like that can you grow concrete argument was such a sad indictment of where we've got to.
My mate Mike Graham, and I know what you think is you think that we ought to be able to engage on both sides.
Yeah, and I don't think he was
one.
trying to learn the thing, and I don't think the guy interviewing was trying to contribute. I thought it was very sad.
Well, there you go. Look, it's all about opinions. Thank you to my amazing panel, and also to you for your company and my team for their hard work. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.